Have you ever experienced a completely wild plot twist in real life? My little brother hitchhikes a lot. He was trying to hitch to Valdez, Alaska, to run a half marathon there before hitching to my parents' house near Fairbanks. He got picked up near Seattle by this woman. They're chatting and my brother is telling her the story of how he rode his bike from Alaska to Argentina. The woman says her neighbor's son had done the same thing. Turns out she was my parents' next-door neighbor. I played EverQuest about 10 years ago and joined a guild. There was this dreamy high-elf cleric who was always playing at the same time as me. Who am I kidding? Everyone played all day on EverQuest. Anyways, we always played together, sometimes out killing things and sometimes just sitting around in the city talking. Over the course of 6 months, this woman became my reason for logging on. We eventually got married, in-game, which her real-life husband, who also played the game, didn't think was that funny. We were very close and she told me many details about her personal life and her husband. It felt like I was on the shotgun end of an affair, but I didn't know any better. It felt great talking to her, my head was in the clouds. Anytime she signed on, my mood improved and I looked forward to it every day. Eventually, she sent me pictures of herself. She was a pretty, blonde-haired woman of 27 years old, a 1 on the binary scale, which is the only honest rating system, and she asked me for pictures in return, but I said no, because it would be weird for a 12-year-old boy to send pictures of himself over the internet. I don't think she saw that coming, and I don't think I ever saw her again. So when my grandmother died, we all found out that when she was 13 in Argentina, her older brother, which none of us knew existed, became psychotic and was hospitalized in a mental institution. Remember, this is 1930s Argentina. Over time, my grandma lost touch with her brother, what with moving overseas and so on. It was always her secret shame that she abandoned her brother. Her brother apparently later died while still hospitalized, alone. Fast forward 70 years. Grandma dies and my father goes to Argentina, we live in Israel by now, to meet with family and find and pay respects at said uncle's grave. He starts going from cemetery to cemetery searching for this uncle, and he can't find him. Maybe he was cremated. So he starts going from mental hospital to mental hospital. Of course, we don't know where he was hospitalized, just searching through records. Sure enough, he picks up a 70-year-old trail and follows his uncle from hospital to hospital, some of which closed down decades ago. Finally, he reached modern times, and, plot twist, he finds his uncle alive and well, 96 years old, in a Buenos Aires mental hospital. Anyway, long story short, my dad took him out of said place, put him in a supported living environment, and got him off 90% of the meds they had him on. Thus emerged a relatively stable but still schizophrenic old man. The epilogue? Recently, he called my aunt and said, "Susan, did you know America has a black president now?" Oh boy. Well, that's funny. He's 96. He's mostly just going to vent his soft racism on his eye-rolling relatives. Also, there are 2 stories about Argentina in our first 3 stories, which isn't super weird, but it is improbable. I did find this one occurrence that happened to a friend of mine rather amusing. My friend who lives on campus near me had 5 other roommates, each with their own rooms of course. One of the roommates was a Chinese guy who for a while had been acting strangely. He alternated between being real friendly and towards being cold and unsure. He'd never open his door completely when people knocked and would sometimes forget things that he'd said when referenced later. His English skills would also fluctuate wildly, and he'd sometimes change his clothes oddly halfway through the day. He'd also usually spend all his time inside his room. He'd make himself a rather large amount of meals throughout the day. So those 6 months of this behavior, which was strange but largely not worth asking about. One day, my friend came back from class, opened the door, which was next to the kitchen, looked to the side into the kitchen, and there were 2 of the odd-acting roommates staring back like deer in the headlights style. Turns out this guy had been hiding his twin brother in his room since he'd arrived and thought that the roommates would report him to the university if they found out. So they took turns leaving the room or watching if the coast was clear before they both came out. They alternated cooking meals one at a time and stuff like that. I was working as an RA at the time, so I assumed they'd thought that if my friend found out, she'd tell me and I'd rat them out to the university. But in Australia, the RA role is a bit more relaxed, and I wasn't about to rat them out. I just found it funny. I've only ever reported really creepy or violent people to university, and there are a fair few creeps living on campus, by the way. The best story I've heard was the guy who spiked his own drink by accident. Someone I knew at university was talking to his new girlfriend about the Glastonbury Festival, which is this huge music festival here in the UK, with around 150,000 attendees. He went every year, and it transpired that she did too and had been going for years. After a while, they started comparing photos that they'd taken over the years. My friend pulls out a picture from his first visit to the festival. He's sitting on a fence with his back to a field. There are only 2 other people in the picture. a girl sitting about 20 feet away with her back to him, and her friend who's taking her picture. His girlfriend realizes that she was also there for the first time that year, and also pulls out a picture. In it, she's sitting in a field, and the only other people are in the picture out of 150,000 people at the festival are a guy sitting on a fence with his back to her and his friend who's taking his picture. So sometime last year I got a friend request from this girl I don't know. We have some friends in common, and her profile says she's gone to the same university and was in the same program, just a few years before me. So I figure we must have met at some party or something, and I accept the request. Flash forward to July. We moved to a new city for a new job, and on my first day, bam! There's the girl who added me on Facebook. We ended up dating for a few months too. Turns out she'd added me because one of our bosses has literally the exact same name as me, and she thought she was adding him to Facebook. Always thought it was a really bizarre situation. I met my aunt on a dating website. I started working at Home Depot around 2005 and was somewhat of an introvert. I graduated in 2004 and was really struggling to break out of the high school mentality and not having a set group of friends to hang out with. So I start at Home Depot, and this one guy, Nick, that I work with invites me out drinking. I'm only 19 at the time, but he's a few years older. We ended up becoming very good friends, but haven't necessarily breached the emotional stuff beyond chicks. Fast forward a few months, and my stepmom's mother dies. Pretty bleak stuff, and I really just have my family to talk to, which of course isn't the same at all. I'm kind of struggling, my buddy Nick is drifting away as well, and the day of the funeral comes. It's towards the end, and I walk up to say my final goodbyes and to look over. Nick is there staring at me dumbfounded. We high-five, hug, and find out he's my stepmom's nephew, and we're both drifting away because we didn't have anyone to bring real crap to outside of our family. We've been best friends ever since. In short, met a friend, high-fived over my grandmother's corpse, and leveled up to cousins. So my friend told me about this one. Her best friend was dating this guy, and they were pretty sure they'd found the one with each other. This guy was all ready to propose and was picking out rings. So these two decide to invite a third party into their boudoir, and as a third he chooses his ex-girlfriend. At this point, any guy with a shred of common sense should know this is probably going to end badly, but this is where the twist is. The girlfriend enjoyed it a little too much and broke up with him to date his ex. Well, I wouldn't have said that was inevitable, but it was a possibility. If your partner is apparently at least bi enough that they're keen for the prospect of another lady and not just doing it to make you happy, they might end up having chemistry. If it was another guy, they might have fallen for them too. My new female bisexual friend Kay is dating a woman named Jen. Jen is super weird. Clingy, demanding, always accusing Kay of being shady, even accused Kay of being in a relationship with me. I'm also female. One day I ask Kay, "So, tell me how you met Jen." Kay and Jen met on a study trip abroad. Jen was romantically interested in Kay, but Kay wasn't really reciprocating. Jen was totally cool with it and they became good friends. In fact, during the trip, Jen introduced Kay via email to her cousin, Andre. Andre and Kay totally hit it off and start an online relationship, complete with exchanging pics and stuff. Andre sends Kay gifts when she returns home, including expensive jewelry. Andre also hooks Jen up with his friend Brian. Everyone is happy. Until one day, Jen finds out from a mutual friend that Andre and Brian are dead. They ran off together in a gay love affair and ended up taking too much of some illegal substance, just weeks before Andre was supposed to come meet Kay in person for the first time. In their shared grief, Kay and Jen started a relationship together. Wow, quite the frickin' story. In fact, I decide it sounds frickin' insane and I start doing some digging. I find the picture of Andre that he sent her in a random Google search. I look for any stories of this torrid love affair gone awry in a hotel binge, and there's nothing. All sorts of weird crap. So I say to Kay, "Have you ever thought that maybe Andre doesn't exist?" She is remarkably interested but not upset. We go to Andre's old email account, we get in using Jen's password. Yes, they share passwords because Jen didn't trust Kay, and Kay loses her crap. Jen had created Andre and the whole story complete with fake pictures, paying a male cousin of hers to have phone conversations with Kay, getting racy pictures and all that stuff. During the Andre relationship, Kay's mother died unexpectedly, and Andre paid for all of Kay's expenses to make it home for the services. And it was Jen the whole time. This was a long con too, over a year of this crap. So Kay emailed Jen from the grave of dead Andre's account and forced her to confess, after which Jen threatened to self-delete. So Kay called the police who took Jen to the hospital, and then Kay got a restraining order and they never saw each other again. As a bonus detail, Jen had even had someone call Kay pretending to be Andre's aunt to tell her how sorry she was that he had died and that he loved her. That might have been Jen herself on the call. Also, supposedly during this binge, Andre and Brian cut each other's nether regions with plastic forks. It was one hell of a story. Kay is married to a real person who I've met now and has a daughter. This incident was several years ago. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was pretty stoked to open an email from a secret admirer in my senior year of high school. Every day for almost 2 weeks, I'd receive a new note listing what she thought were my better qualities, how she was too shy to admit her feelings to me in person, and she'd finally reveal herself at the big dance coming up that Friday. The emails became more and more forthcoming as the end of the week approached and finally culminated with a clue about how to figure out who she was. These are the only species besides humans that do the deed for pleasure. And I totally thought I was getting some action with a clue like that. I was a heavy-set lineman in the football team and kind of a class clown, which meant despite my lack of confidence, I was always in with the popular crowd. So, as we pre-drank for the dance, I told a few friends to be on the lookout for something dolphin-related. Word spread quickly, and by the time we arrived, I had a huge group trying to help me solve the mystery. A teammate of mine found out as the night went on that Adrienne, this cute girl I sat next to in social class, had a temporary dolphin tattoo on her left shoulder. After some prodding by my friends, I went over to her and the group of girls she was with. A slow song started as I sheepishly asked for a dance. With the entire school watching my 2-week-long mystery reach its climax, she leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "You're a complete jerk sometimes," promptly followed with a slap across the face. I'd never felt that level of confusion or embarrassment. She had orchestrated the whole thing because she didn't like my class clown demeanor in social class. I still hate dolphins. Has nobody considered that she actually did like him, but was severely embarrassed when he told everyone about her notes, and was now under a huge amount of pressure because the entire school knew about it? Hence why she called him a jerk and slapped him, and then made a crappy cover story about how she didn't like him being a class clown. I'm sure there are tons of girls that would rather come across as temporarily psychotic than have their intimate secret crushes broadcast to the entire school, especially for a guy that wasn't the star quarterback of the high school. I was job searching in my early 20s. I got this job interview and the guy didn't know I was coming. He grudgingly walks me into his office and starts asking me questions. I'd been to so many interviews, I just wasn't in the mood for someone to make me feel like I wasn't welcome. He asks me why I want to work here, and part of my answer is, I like to help people, and he responds with, bullcrap. I'm surprised, but I can tell that this is going nowhere. The rest of the interview is a formality, and I end with the sarcastic, sorry to bother you. I get back to my apartment and I'm feeling pretty down. I receive a voicemail asking me where I was for my interview. They say if I'm still interested to call back. I compare the number, name, and company with the business card I was given, and it turns out I was on the wrong floor. I just walked into a random office and was given an interview. But yeah, I didn't get either of those jobs. Well, it was very nice of them to go to the lengths they did even after you missed the interview first time. That makes your sarcasm to that first interviewer's passive aggression even more funny. I hope attention to detail wasn't on your CV. This one happened to a friend of mine. She had been feeling lonely for months and had found a guy she really got on with after meeting him gaming. Sadly, they lived too far apart to meet face to face. Cue months of them getting closer until he asks her out. They start e-dating. She confesses to me that she really likes him and she's saving money to go visit. Fast forward 14 months, she's saved the money, she's booked the flight, she's going to meet the man she loves and everything is perfect. She's flying out the very next day. Cue me getting a hysterical call late at night. It's hard to decipher what she's saying. I get her to slow down and take it easy. He's not him. I ask for clarification. He's not him, she cries. I'm still confused. I don't get it. What does that mean? He lied about what he does or his age or something? I asked, and she replies, No, he lied about who he is. What he is. He's not him, he is she. He's not Michael, she's Michelle. Turns out the girl was a lonely lesbian who looked a bit butch if appropriately dressed or made up for the webcam. She'd been using pictures of her brother the entire time for everything else. Sadly, my friend almost had a nervous breakdown and has ended up with serious trust issues and a medium-sized case of homophobia. In short, my friend dated Michael for almost 2 years before finding out just before she met the man of her dreams that it was Michelle, the guy's sister, instead. This one's pretty good as far as out-of-left-field twists go. There was a kids' baseball league in a town in Texas, and they'd have a few games a few times per week. The head and assistant coaches are dads of kids who play. During a game, a dad of one of the low-skill kids gets worked up because his son is only playing the league minimum innings. The coach refuses to play the sucky kid more because he doesn't want to risk annoying everyone else by throwing the game. The parent gets angrier and angrier until by the end of the game he's busting at the seams. After the game, the guy confronts the head coach in the parking lot and takes a swing at him. They start fighting and rolling around on the ground. The wife of the head coach shows up at this point and starts screeching at the parent to get off her husband. The twist? She doesn't know the context of the fight, and only going off the info she has, she screams, "Quit fighting my husband, you SOB! It's the other coach that's been screwing your wife!" The expression when that guy froze was priceless. So a friend once had a girlfriend, and their relationship was pretty brutal. After a while, she moved back to her hometown, 2 hours north of Stockholm. As her friend, things seemed to be turning for the better, as it seems they were going their separate ways. Then she dropped the pregnancy bomb on him. Out of guilt, duty or love, I don't know, he decides to try and make it work as he moves to her town and try to start a life there. The plot twist was that she wasn't pregnant. This wouldn't be so bad unless it were the fact that she had encouraged him to not use protection. This in turn resulted in her being knocked up for real. As if she hadn't screwed him over enough, she then revealed after a few months into the pregnancy that she was lesbian and had a girlfriend on the side. It really sounds like something out of one of those bad shows on the TV, and needless to say, my buddy was in shambles upon returning to Stockholm to start anew. In short, my buddy fell for the old fake prego, real prego, then dump scheme. I used to know a guy named Ben. Ben was the biggest two-faced D-bag I've ever known. He once met a girl online, went out to meet her, and returned a few days later. When asked about her, to his female friends, he'd said that there was no spark or chemistry or whatever, and to his guy friends, he'd say that she was so ugly he couldn't stand to look at her. Ben hated ugly women. Ben and I lived together briefly, and my overweight girlfriend, later wife and now ex, stayed with us frequently. She was friendly with him, would hang out with him while I was at work, and frequently drive him around if needed. As soon as she was gone, though, he'd laugh about how fat she was. Ben hated fat women. Years and years pass, I'm on OkCupid one day and I see a new member. She looks vaguely familiar. I look at her photos and it hits me. Ben, who was already unattractive, gained a bunch of weight and became transgender. In essence, he became a large, ugly woman, the very thing he claimed to hate the most. The end. Or is it? Transgendered Ben briefly dated a lesbian friend of mine who lives with my ex-wife and would come hang out not knowing that he was in the house of the woman he'd only a few years before make fun of for being fat. Their relationship with the lesbian didn't last, needless to say. My friend's mum was in hospice care, dying of cancer, when she told her son, my friend, that the man she was married to, the man that raised him his entire life, wasn't his biological father. This was news to everyone involved and was later confirmed through testing. Without going into too many details, the man who raised my friend was not the most attentive father, nor all that warm and kind. They had kind of a typical broken home story. He was a bit of a drunk, got divorced from the mum, and the kid was a big-time troublemaker. The final twist came shortly after their mum passed, though. The non-bio dad took the kid hunting and told him that he didn't care, that my friend was his son, that nothing and no one was going to take that away from him. Coming from that man, it was huge and nobody expected it. They became extremely close after that, and last I heard, they still visit each other several times a week. Well, I'm glad there wasn't a third plot twist there with that hunting trip turning into some sort of horror movie. It's weirdly sweet how much warmer they became once the truth was out there, although I can't help but wonder why the dad couldn't have been a better dad from the start. People are just weird though. My mother told me that my 2-year older brother Jeffrey died 2 weeks after birth. Anyway, so I met a guy in the lobby of the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. We were hitting it off really well. We both loved and wanted to become physicists, and we loved Doctor Who. The only problem was he was 22 and I was 20. We told each other our names, his being Jeffrey and mine Lucy, and gave each other our phone numbers. A couple of days later, we went to dinner as a date. He told me that he was adopted into a family at only a couple of weeks old. I told him about my older brother dying at around the same age. He asked for his name, which I politely gave him. He got a little worried and started to sweat. We went back to my house. We did not do the deed, ever, and we called my parents. They said, do a blood test. The very next day, we went to the doctor, and so it turns out I dated my brother. In short, I dated my supposedly dead older brother. Back in my high school days, my friend Joe would always be the one to throw the parties when his parents were out of town. After one such party, we had some beer and liquor left over and weren't sure what to do with it. Joe's sister was not 21 yet, but she was in college, so we asked her if she could keep it in her closet. That way, if Joe's parents found it, they wouldn't be that hard on her because everyone drinks in college. A couple of weeks later, Joe wakes up to a text message, "Mum found your booze, I told her it was yours." Frick, right? So Joe gets up and goes downstairs to see the few beer cans and bottle of vodka. His mum tells him to throw out all the beer. He finishes doing that and then gets to the bottle of pretty nice vodka. "I guess you want me to throw this out too?" To which his mum replies, "Well, I'm not going to make you buy another one." Awesome twist, huh? We were pumped. Fast forward another couple of weeks. Another friend of ours is throwing a party, and Joe volunteers to bring the windfall that is this bottle of vodka. We get to the party and pour some shots, and wouldn't you know it, the bottle was filled with water. Well played, Joe's mum. Well played. What's the worst job you've ever had? I sprinkled mud onto potatoes that had already been washed, so they'd look freshly dug when they hit the supermarket. Most depressing holiday job I've ever had. There are some terrible jobs on here, but this is so brilliantly, horribly futile, incomprehensibly pointless. I spent a week working the business end of the MECSEP 2000, the actual name of the machine is repressed deep down inside me, which was a grinding horror that separated tiny scraps of chicken meat from splinters of bone. The chicken was delivered in frozen 10-kilogram blocks. Me and 3 or 4 other chosen ones had the task of breaking up the gore block with a chisel and feeding it into the mechanical maw. One day, one of our blocks consisted entirely of wishbones. Thousands of them. I've had terrible jobs, but nothing compares to this guy that called into a radio contest for worst job titles, as his was Chicken Butthole Remover. He stood on the slaughter line and made sure the carcasses were butthole-free. If they weren't, it was his job to fix it. Tell us why you won this job. Well, I've always been passionate about not eating chicken buttholes, so I figured I could do some good in the world. Just making sure one family doesn't accidentally consume chicken poo strainer is enough for me. Dancing bear. I was a waiter at a kids' restaurant which had a bear as its mascot. The new guy had to be the bear on their first day, which meant putting on a massive bear costume over our waiter's uniform, including a huge fur head that you could barely see out of. You were then led around the place to wave at the parents and play with the kids once per hour. If you spoke, you were fired, as some of these kids were return customers who would recognize the waiter's voice. Wanting to impress my boss, I really hammed it up. I danced, I gestured, I goofed around, I sat on a mother's lap. I ruffled a father's hair while he growled, "Get off me or I'll stab you." The boss loved it so much that he made me be the bear every day that I worked there. Which would be great, except that it was August and so hot that the restaurant's aircon broke. The bear suit hadn't been washed in the history of the restaurant, so served as a memorial to the sweat of 100 fallen waiters. Little kids would run headfirst at the bear and headbutt my family jewels with depressing regularity, and all it earned me was the disgust of my wait team who thought I was goofing off work by being the bear, since it was clearly easier than carrying 2 plates of reheated lasagna across the room and refilling drinks. As many other commenters noted, I was relieved when this person clarified that the job in question was someone in a bear costume and not a live bear in a children's restaurant. Admittedly, the bear's job in that theoretical situation wouldn't be great either. Cutting fancy glass for use in mosaics. A glass cutter is basically a pen with a small metal wheel at one end and a metal ball on the other. Fancy glass is thick, heavy, expensive, and sharp. The weight, thickness, and texture changes drastically. One might be a 3 cm smooth green glass sheet, and the next might be a textured 5 cm piece of orange. There is no training, and glass dust is a thing. My fingertips were swollen with tiny shards of glass, and I broke much more glass than I was worth. It was a short gig. I just can't fathom why someone would do a task like that without at least considering wearing some kind of protective glove. Kinda reminds me of a task I used to do when I worked in some labs. We used an oxyhydrogen torch on a stand to cut or seal quartz vials. They came as a straw, and you'd cut it in half, closing each half on one end when forming the cut. Then we'd fill them with organic sample material, often powdered hair or toenails, and then use the torch and a weak vacuum to seal the open end with the sample inside. That way, the mass of the sample is permanently stored and can be irradiated and analyzed over and over. Anyway, this task essentially meant that you had to be holding this tiny little vial about the diameter of a drinking straw in a torch flame hot enough to melt fricking quartz, above 1600 degrees, in a matter of 2 seconds or so, and your bare fingers were about 2 inches from the flame. There was no way you'd have the dexterity to do it with leather gloves on, and anything else would be at risk of melting into your flesh if you accidentally got burned. That was a rather unnerving task. My worst was probably for a moving company. Everyone dreads moving day and for me, that was every day. I liked it. New houses with new challenges and new people to charm out of tip money every day. I also got a nice workout. It was the illiterate morons I had to work with and scamming bosses that got me out of it. Hotel housekeeping. If it comes out of the human body, I've cleaned it up. I started in a by-the-hour motel when I was 14, owned by a woman who didn't bother with hazardous waste procedure and cleaned up what looked like a murder scene with nothing but bleach and kitchen gloves. I walked into that room and was absolutely positive that when I pulled back the shower curtain, there was going to be a body in the bathtub. Thankfully, there wasn't, just blood everywhere. The owner refused to let me call the police and just made me clean it, and I didn't want to get in crap for bleaching a murder scene at 14, so I never did call the cops. That hotel owner definitely killed someone and made you clean it up. Picking mangoes in Australia. Many people are unaware that if you snap the stalk on a mango, poisonous sap flies out, which makes you blister quite dramatically. Also the best job because of the beautiful scenery. Australia, where even the fruit can kill ya. I worked at a slaughterhouse for a little while. They killed steers there but got pork shipped in. The hams came in a giant cardboard vat, probably 5 feet wide and 4 feet deep. They were heavily waxed on the inside to make them waterproof and had steel banding running around the outside, kind of like an old keg or barrel. Once we fished out most of the hams and trimmed them, there was always a couple of feet of blood at the bottom. As the new guy, it was my job to dangle over the edge with a meat hook in one hand, fishing out the remaining hams and scraps. Usually, it was about an hour in shoulder-deep blood with your face next to the surface. I worked in an office, entry-level job after a career switch. My boss was a crazy woman, never happy, never satisfied, always changing her mind and blaming everyone else. One day she called me into her office and she gave me 2 projects, and got mad when I asked her questions about how she wanted them. At the end of the meeting, I asked her, "Which of these 2 do you need first?" Her answer? Both. I thought she had misunderstood my question, so I repeated, "But which of them do you need first?" "Both." "No, really, which of these 2 do you need first?" Her answer at this point was yelling, "Both, both, 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 both." A few months later, I had enough of her crap and I went to HR to complain about her treatment of the staff. Of course, she had a friend in the HR department and she got wind of it. And she called me in her office and she complained about me complaining about her, and she told me, "You don't complain here, you leave." That was my clue. I called my headhunter and found myself a new, better job with better pay. A few years later, I'd built my career and I was actually ahead of her in responsibility and position. I met her at a conference and she was giving false praise how I was one of the best workers she'd ever had, and then rhetorically asked me why I left, in front of other people. I told her that I had to thank her for my career since she was the one who suggested I leave by telling me, "You don't complain here, you leave." She really didn't like that one. A lovely bit of vicarious justice for those of us who've ever had a crappy and insincere manager in their lives. Revenge like this is very sweet indeed. Door-to-door solar panel salesman for a corrupt home energy company. Nothing better than knocking on someone's front door right in the middle of a Patriots game. I did door-to-door home renovations, windows, doors, sliding, etc. right after the 2008 market crash. I can't tell you how many people told me they weren't going to be able to make their next mortgage payment, let alone spend $20,000 on new windows. Soul-crushing. Crash or no crash, it's still pretty hard even now when the economy is not so bad and people still can't afford $20,000 on new windows. Internship at a public relations firm in college. I was promised agency experience, writing opportunities, and valuable experience. Turns out what they actually meant was sitting in a room for 8 hours cold calling CEOs from an outdated call list and trying to trick them into a sales presentation. Might I add, about a month into the job they hired a new intern manager who was the epitome of Massachusetts trash. Drove to work every day from the Cape on his Harley, it was 2 hours one way, and lauded his degree from Bunker Hill Community College. He chain-smoked and DJ'd on the side at trash North Shore nightclubs. He insisted on sitting in the room with us for 8 hours to check if we were actually making calls, all while berating us for being poor employees and cheap labor. On my last day of the internship, he called me into his office and told me, "The only reason you're still here is because we didn't have to pay you. You'll never be successful like me. You're not cut out for the business world. If I were you, I'd drop out and try to find a trade you'll succeed in." Even as a 19-year-old, I knew an idiot when I saw one. I looked him square in the eye and said, "You can go F yourself," and walked out with the other interns. He then wrote a letter of complaint to my school to try and have my internship credit revoked, but luckily my advisor knew the situation and cut him out. Dan the DJ, if you're reading this, I want you to know I took your advice and did my best to never become you. Being poor means being willing to do effed up things for tiny bits of money, so I've had more sucky jobs than I can count. But the one that stands out the most is door-to-door political fundraising and canvassing. This was back in the early 90s. The way it worked was that you had a clipboard, a pen, petition, and some envelopes. The whole crew would meet at the office and then pile into the 15-passenger vans. The supervisor would drive us out to a territory, or turf, anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours away from the office. Then they would divide us into pairs and give each pair of canvassers a map marked with the pair's assigned turf. If I recall correctly, we started knocking on doors around 3 or 4 p.m. and kept it up until 8 p.m. In that time, we were supposed to knock on people's doors and talk to them about whatever issue we were working on at that point. When I did my brief stint, it was nursing home reform legislation. Then we were supposed to get the occupant to sign our petition and make a contribution, preferably a check or charge on the spot. Our nightly quota was $120 per person. If you think that people hate having telemarketers call their houses at dinner time to ask them for money, just imagine how much they love it when those same telemarketers show up unannounced on their front doorsteps. Between crappy weather, vicious dogs, smackheads and tweakers answering the door, people's pervasive hatred of trespassers and solicitors, and constant fear of being fired for missing my quota, field canvassing was definitely one of the worst jobs I've ever had. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at a used car lot for about a month my first summer home from college. Pay was decent and under the table. The summer of 2001, I was getting paid $15 an hour, which was awesome for a college kid looking to save up for beer money in the fall. I was the lot boy and prepped the cars that were sold, charged up the batteries on the ones that had been sitting for a while, and picked up lunch for the sales team. Overall, it wasn't bad, but the work was tedious in the sun, and the people that I worked with were odd. Sales guy 1. When he wasn't selling used cars, he was a bouncer or door guy at a third-rate adult club. He would borrow our high-end SUVs to drive escorts on the weekends. Without the boss knowing, he would have me put dealer plates on them after the owner left on Saturday afternoons. Sales guy 2, this was a peak rap or rock era, and he dressed and acted like a Fred Durst clone. Bragged about how he had multiple girlfriends and would make them bring him food at alternating times. One afternoon, the lunch schedule got crossed and we had an amazing trashy girl fight in the parking lot. The office manager was the former girlfriend of Sales Guy 1 and Sales Guy 2, who retired from dancing at the club to go straight. She still escorted on the weekends, though, processed finance applications and did the cash drops at the bank. The owner, he paid everything in cash and specialized in selling cars for just below $10,000. Every Friday we had a customer who would come in and co-sign on a crappy Nissan Altima with $80K on it and would pay in cash. Always from New York or North Jersey. I just assumed they were engaging in substance dealing or human trafficking. Our mechanic was a quiet guy. He kept to himself and would listen to classic rock all day. After about a week, he told me he was happy for the job as he had been away for a while. He was good about showing me how to work on engines, and we would hang out in the garage drinking Miller High Life out of paper cups. The guy loved Steely Dan. After about a month, I noped right out of there. While the pay was good, the ongoing drama of the people I worked with wasn't enough to hang around. Sales Guy 2 had just gotten arrested on the lot for failing to pay child support, and I knew I was just a few days away of being guilty by association or something. I was a furnace helper in a steel factory. We made bumper mounts and hinges for truck hoods and other heavy steel parts. I unloaded red-hot metal parts from the furnace with a pair of tongs. I used to catch fire 2 or 3 times a day. I hated that. Never have I seen someone so casually drop the fact that they regularly immolated themselves as part of their work. That's not far off referencing that they only had to ward off a few axe-wielding psychopaths from time to time in my book. Dealer in a casino. You learn a lot about different games and get to play cards all shift. You also make some pretty good coin with tips and whatnot. However, you get to meet some of the worst people on the planet. When people start losing money at your table, several hundred to several thousand at a time, suddenly that fun atmosphere becomes soul-suckingly tense, to the point of, you better hope you're not walking alone when you're off tonight. But you get to call your pit boss over and say, this patron just threatened me, and boom, booted out of the casino, banned for 6 months to a year, and possibility of criminal charges. Sometimes I got a nice justice semi working there. Anyone who's thinking of being a dealer, it's definitely not for everyone. If you ever wanted to work wonders for your confidence and have the ability to become a stone when it comes to people being absolute crapheads to you, I suggest it. I think back to what skills I've gained from my time dealing. I've learned to be grateful, and when I have a crap day, I remind myself that I'm not dealing anymore. When people get sarcastic or angry or crappy towards me, it doesn't bother me anymore because I've dealt, no pun intended, with the worst. If you're a student and can handle taking a lot of crap, or want to learn how to handle taking a lot of crap, try being a dealer. You make great money at the cost of your social life. You generally work nights and all through the weekends. One of the things I didn't really mention, but it's implied, when people are giving you crap at your table, you have to stand there and take it. You don't have the option to walk away. Hopefully, your pit bosses are good enough to have your back. I'm a dealer at a smaller casino, and it's the most soul-sucking job I've ever done. You see the worst in everyone, because, let's be honest, no one is ever a winner in the long-run gambling. At least your pit bosses actually throw people out for threatening dealers. Ours walk the other way or act like they don't hear the guy screaming and calling the female dealer a working girl or the C-word. I collected baby batter from chickens for artificial insemination. You have to, help get them off. Not my job. I just walk into the room and the frickers immediately begin to expel the white gold. We then have to rush them and get the collection vial in place quickly or the day's worth of product was lost. So much stuff on my gloves. Ugh. Worked for the UMG straight out of high school processing CD orders. It was still a thing back then. I was 17 and the only guy in the office, working with nothing but 40-plus-year-old women. Sweet Christ, the raunchiest conversations that led to me discovering the definition of TMI. The work was fine, just data entry, and they had a massive backlog when I arrived. In the first week, I cleared it all out, and no one in the office had anything to do, including myself. I couldn't browse the web. I brought a book into the office and was reading it, and got yelled at by my supervisor for it. I explained that I had nothing to do, and sitting around staring at nothing for 8 hours a day was torture. What about our backlog? It's gone. That can't be true. Well, go and check for yourself. They came back. Well, okay, if you have nothing to do, come and talk to me. After a week of coming to them every hour on the hour asking for something to do, and them saying they had nothing, they yelled at me again for bugging them. They eventually fired me for refusing to come in 10 minutes prior to my scheduled time, unpaid, and logging into the phones. There was nothing going on, and I sure as crap wasn't going to sit around doing nothing for one more minute than I had to, much less unpaid. A close second was many years later, I was brought in to package software for a company that had bought another company. Get it up to their standards, make sure it's installed silently, etc. They didn't have a place for me to sit, so they put me in an unheated warehouse. In the winter. With massive bay doors that opened up 4 to 6 times a day for deliveries. After working there for a month, I still didn't even have a computer to work on. At the end of that month, I got a computer, but there was nothing for me to do still. It took me a week to track down my manager after this point, and he said that they wouldn't have work for me for a few more months. Aren't you lucky? You get to do nothing and collect a paycheck, he said to me. Yeah, real lucky. Then they brought on another guy for some reason to do the same job. We were both incredibly confused, to say the least. After another month and having to read about 24 books, I just stopped showing up, submitted my time and checked my email every day to see if there was any work to do, as well as sending weekly emails asking if there were any tasks coming my way soon to my manager. Finally, after 2 months, they caught on and let me go. I didn't feel bad about it in the slightest. I can't believe roofing isn't on here. That is the absolute freaking worst. Pretty much like being a human egg on a griddle all day with a side order of heaving shingles around and trying not to fall and break your neck. I was a cashew flicker at a candy factory. Literally, I flicked the bad cashews off a conveyor belt. Managed a local restaurant, worked 10 to 12-hour days, often with closing and leaving at 1 a.m., only to be back to open at 8 a.m. 6 days a week with an 8 a.m. meeting on my only one full day off. Pyramid scheme selling Kirby vacuums for in-house demonstrations. I got out of that within a couple of weeks. I got offered a job doing this. I went to the interview and he said I'd earn around £2,200 a month, which sounded amazing, but I thought it was a bit too good to be true and didn't take it in the end. I didn't realize it was a pyramid scheme, though. A unanimous recurring factor on all the many terrible job, quitting and interview stories that I've done for this channel has been how prevalent these schemes are at sneaking into the serious job market. You've been warned, folks. I took a job with a marketing company working at the mall trying to get people to take surveys. Literally hundreds of people walking right by you, refusing to make eye contact. It's like being a ghost. Horrible job, Hated every second of it. I quit after 6 hours. Lifeguard. It was hours upon hours of boredom intermingled with seconds of sheer terror. Glorified cleaners. Spent most of my time cleaning changing rooms and toilets, with a bit of time on poolside doing jack all. In 4 years, there was one rescue when I was on shift, and I was mopping the floor in reception. Lifeguard is the best job I've had. For one, our rules were probably a bit different, but I worked at a beach, and by our rules, we could only sit for half an hour at a time. So in an 8-hour day, we only worked a max of 4 hours. The other 4, we would read a book or something. Also, as a lifeguard, you could check out hot women and not be seen as a creep. I didn't actually take the job, but it would have been the worst by far. I applied for a position in an industrial bakery as a sanitation technician. As advertised, the job would entail disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling equipment. But when I showed up for my interview, really an informal orientation, the nice lady told me I would actually be standing at one end of a conveyor belt and given one simple task: to pick up trays of bread coming off the conveyor belt, rotate them 90 degrees, and place them on a different belt, for the entire duration of my 12-hour overnight shift. It would have nearly doubled my pay, but I just couldn't do it. I put my little hat back on and went back to rolling burritos. Even in the darkest, most horrible, open-to-close days of my time at the burrito restaurant, I would console myself with the thought of that job and how much worse things could be. What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? Grandma got a flat tire, pulled over. As she was on the side fixing the tire, her car was hit and totaled. Right from her hands. She was actually okay. I used to roller skate as a kid outside my house down a hill and never wore any kind of protection. Suddenly, one day before I go out, my older brother tells me I can't leave unless I put on a helmet, which is weird since he's never cared before. Anyway, I do it, and that day, for the first time ever, I fell and landed on the back of my head so hard that the helmet cracked. That crack would have probably been my skull had I not worn it. Years ago, I was on a first meet for an internet date. We met at a bar and the bartender carded us. Even though we were both older, they were doing stings in the area, so he was carding every single person. Handed mine right over, but my date was a jerk about it. The bartender checked mine and handed it back to me. He checked his, and rather than handing it back to him, he placed it on the bar right in front of me. It had the stamp of an unspeakable act offender on it. The guy picked it up, looked at the bartender, looked at me, and then got up and walked out. I immediately Googled him. He was on the registry and had been in prison for the unspeakable act before. Lesson learned, always Google people. The bartender and I are still friends. I sold my bar and grill business in August 2019. I sold my 3 restaurants in February 2020 for way more than they were worth. Now 2 have closed post-COVID. This one just materialized yesterday, actually. About a year ago at my job, I was offered to switch from my current team, where I was established for a few years and had seniority, for a new department that had just started to kick off, write processes, basically start from square one. A lot more work for the same amount of pay. I figured, screw it, and went. Yesterday they announced that they just closed the physical HQ office for my old department, and everyone in that part of the company would have to either move to one of 14 random states that we can't pick, it's basically chosen by roulette wheel for where you're going, to a local office, or they're going to be fired on June 22. Thankfully, since I'm part of my new department, I wasn't included in that mandate. Phew. I was a teen driver not paying attention at an intersection at the crest of a hill with low visibility when the light turned green. The car behind me honked, and just as I was about to go, a truck barreled through the red light on the perpendicular road at decidedly ludicrous speed. If I'd been paying attention and gone when the light turned green, I very likely would have been T-boned to death. Closest call I've ever had. I would wager that if I were in the driver's seat, even though I would have survived, my undies, trousers, and the seat itself would have been decidedly rendered unusable once I'd realized what had happened. I was working in an amusement park during college. I used to come home on a Friday afternoon and usually pick up a Friday shift as well as a full weekend, during the month that the park was only open on weekends. I was a manager at my attraction. One particular Friday, I got home and was too exhausted to do a Friday shift, so I bagged it and decided to just work the Saturday and Sunday and be back at school on Monday. I got a call from a good friend and co-worker telling me that our attraction was in flames, there were casualties, and a couple of my friends and co-workers were missing. 7 people lost their lives. My co-worker, assistant manager, went back in and pulled people out to safety. He was okay. I was in shock for a few days. Had I done what I usually do, I would have been there in charge and I know I would have gone in to help. It could have been an entirely different situation. So yeah, I dodged a bullet, but a devastating event happened. I'll never know. To keep very true to the topic, I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct buzz, crack, buzz as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard adjacent to the lake and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there at the time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop for frick's sake. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet I dodged. When I was 16, I used a fake ID to go out clubbing. The legal age in Ireland is 18, so I passed for it and did it all the time. One night I felt sick and decided to leave my friends and go home. I knew there was a taxi rank in a small alley somewhere and was looking for it when an older guy, 20s probably, offered to show me. The alley he brought me down was not the taxi rank. Once I realized, I tried to go back, but he pushed me against a wall and told me I wasn't going anywhere. I just remember not being able to scream. I just froze. It felt like forever, but probably only a few seconds later, some guys I went to school with just happened to walk down by the alley, also looking for taxis, and saw me. One of them yelled out my name, and then he realized the guy had his arm across the throat, and he went mental. The guy jumped the wall at the end of the alley, and I just burst into tears. My schoolmate took me home and made sure I was okay. I'm in my mid-30s now with 3 daughters, and I still shudder when I think about this. Driving to Phoenix from Utah for a job in January of 1989. My new boss told me if I wasn't there by 8 a.m. Monday morning, he'd give the job to someone else. It was 8 p.m. on Sunday evening when he told me that. By the time I got to Flagstaff, I was delirious and hallucinating. I hadn't slept in 2 days, I'd been partying. I pulled over for a nap at a rest area. So cold. I started the truck just to heat it up a little bit. The next thing I remember, I was lying in the bed of my truck, with a guy gently slapping my face. Some trucker watched me start the truck, 79 Ford, and slump over to sleep. He said he was worried because he could hear the exhaust leak as I sat there idling. Made a mental note of the time. An hour later, he checked on me and I was unconscious. So after pounding on the windows for a few minutes, he noticed the sliding window latch was busted, just like the one in his own 79 Ford. He pulled me out through the back window and saved me from carbon monoxide poisoning. Took me a week to shake off that headache. No, I didn't get the job. I didn't roll up to the job site until just before noon. The big boss wasn't cool about it. On a brightish note, one of the guys on another crew saw me begging for the job and thought I had moxie. He hired me for a dirtier, crappier job that I grew to loathe. But at least it wasn't a wasted trip and I didn't die. I matched with a guy on Tinder who played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was really charming and seemed nice. He asked me to fly down to Atlantic City for Memorial Day weekend, said he'd pay for everything, airfare, hotel, food, etc. But I'd never met him before and he refused to give me his phone number. I was uncomfortable flying to meet a stranger, so I told him no. 2 weeks later, he was on the news for kicking and killing his girlfriend's dog. What's with the Atlanta Falcons and dogs? I'm not even trying to be funny, like that's really messed up. I took my wife to an indoor shooting range in 2014. I'd been at this range many times and safety was always their top priority. They made you sit through a safety video, take a quiz, and get a temporary certification before they allowed you into the range. The place got really busy and their safety policy became less stringent as time went on. I noticed that the lane next to us that time had 3 people in it, already a violation of rules. 2 big guys and 1 tiny woman, probably in her 20s. They were handing her various firearms and laughing when she couldn't handle the recoil. Big violation there and incredibly irresponsible. This girl was muzzle sweeping everyone. Another huge violation. I got a bad feeling and told my wife to pack it up because we were leaving. As soon as we started walking away, bang! That girl had fired a round right where my wife was standing just a few seconds prior. I told the range officers that they needed to get in there and do something about those idiots and that we weren't coming back. I've only been to a range a few times since that happened and now I don't even go at all. Too many idiots. From the one range I used to frequent in my life, I can tell you that at the very first muzzle sweep you would be out and with a temporary ban, at the very least. Crazy stuff. I was out at the bar with my friends and feeling tired. When I said I was leaving to turn in early, they all good-naturedly gave me crap. That night they all got $1,500 tickets for public urination on their walk home from the bar. Not exactly life-changing, but not a small bullet either. 2005, my friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or a really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night, the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel that we'd decided against. My mom wasn't going to leave for Katrina. I told her I was going to take me and my little sister and hitchhike if she didn't pack the car and leave within the hour. My dad didn't leave, and he ended up on the roof with our neighbor because our house got flooded. No way all of us would have survived. Katrina decimated my town. Everything 2 miles inland or less was destroyed. I was booked on Pan Am Flight 103, which went down over Lockerbie, Scotland. I didn't have a premonition or anything supernatural, I just decided to cancel my seat. Didn't think anything of it until the plane went down and my mother had written down my flight plan and reminded me. This was back in the day when you could cancel without a penalty up to a couple of days in advance. On any given day, we make decisions for no concrete reason, really. I just chose not to go that day, and we come to learn it was a good decision. I try not to evaluate my decision because I don't want to affect my future decisions by second-guessing or trying to work the odds. This is only one example of times that I've dodged a significant bullet. I stopped duck hunting with a guy because he would put his 12-gauge Remington 1100 on his shoulders with no thought to where the barrel was pointing. I'd tell him to point it the other way or I'd stop and move to the other side. But he'd shifted it around and it would end up pointing at my head when we were walking. I told him I wouldn't hunt with him anymore and he was really teed off at me and called me a fricking Nancy, and that there was no danger because the safety was on. A couple of weeks later, he told me he'd had an accidental discharge with the gun on his shoulder. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was subletting an apartment in college and got zapped by the electric stove. Gave notice immediately and moved out with very clear reasons why I was moving out. That building burnt a few weeks later. A Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam. Booking his flight home online, he said to his wife, "You know, I'm sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is crap, the hosties are miserable, it'll cost more, but I'm booking with Singapore Airlines." So instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 k's ahead of it. I got chucked off a horse. I hit the ground so hard I felt my soul leave my body. Started to cough up blood and was having trouble breathing within 30 seconds. Rushed to the hospital and the doctors were running down the hallway with me on a backboard. Doctors running is always a bad sign. I was sure I was dying. Came to find out that I broke 2 bones in my back and collapsed a lung. Once I was more with it, a nurse handed me my helmet and said, "It's a good job you were wearing this." It had been cracked almost in half. If I hadn't been wearing that, it would have been my head, and I most certainly would be dead or permanently disabled. Wear your helmet, kids. A bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it's such a small island, cars are limited to 1 per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town and came up to a red light behind a bus. As is tradition, I scooted around the bus to be in front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later, a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked. Without question, 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. My only other Bermuda bus-based encounter was driving home from my first job in the rain. An oncoming bus in the opposite lane went through a massive puddle and sent what looked like a tidal wave of water right at me. It literally picked me and my little Yamaha V50 right up and swept us off the road into some grass. So I guess in the end it was me won, buses won. I attempted to self-delete. I ended up passing out in some bushes near the train station. Early the next morning, a girl I went to high school with, who I barely knew, saw me while she was boarding the train for a college interview early in the morning. She recognized me and told the conductor. He dismissed me as a junkie who just needed to sleep it off. She said, "I know him. He doesn't do substances or drink. Call 911 now." 3 days in a coma. I'm very grateful now. About 6 months after I left my ex, he got caught sending very inappropriate content to a 12-year-old. He was 34 at the time. I really needed a job, and the manager at my dispensary in my area offered me a spot. I said no, and 4 days later they were raided and everyone got arrested. I'm confused. Did they not have a license, or are the feds just raiding dispensaries because it's technically still illegal by federal law? Yes, the latter exactly. The narrator is very confused about this later one. You can have a licensed, commonplace sort of store that is in actual fact illegal under the laws of the country you live in. Very strange. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She had previously pulled a knife on me. I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who'd be my boss and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I'd always wanted to live in for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance. So if I'd taken that, I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle, but then moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and opened up like a tin can. If I'd sat where I originally intended, I would have been killed. Was driving on a freeway in the right lane when there was a sudden traffic jam ahead. I slammed on my brakes and was about to swerve onto the shoulder when I noticed that I wasn't sure the semi behind me could stop, and I didn't know how long we actually had a shoulder, construction was happening at the time, made the decision to rear-end the car in front of me to stay off the shoulder. The truck went onto the shoulder, brakes squealing, and finally managed to stop when the back tires of their trailer were level with me. Good thing we weren't in a center lane and that we happened to have a shoulder at that moment. As a bonus, I stopped in time and didn't hit the car in front of me after all, though I would have happily taken that hit and hopefully only would have shook up the people in front of me, in place of literally being hit by a truck. I once convinced 2 police officers that I was the one on my fake ID. It was my older brother's ID 22. I was 19 at the time. Me and my roommate were checking out the liquor store and the cashier said my roommate's ID was fake. It was an actual fake with his photo, so the cashier quickly told the other very large worker to lock and barricade the door immediately. They called the cops and practically held us hostage until the cops arrived. My roommate ended up getting a ticket for his literal fake ID, and I convinced the cops I was my brother. We look like brothers, but we definitely don't look like the same person. What sold them was when one of the 2 cops asked me to name some streets. We were in our college town about 2 hours away from where my home address was. I recited the address on the ID because it was my childhood home, and the cop said, "No, name some streets around this address." He apparently grew up and went to high school in that district, so he was testing me. I named like 5 or 10 road names in that area, and I was good to go. I have no idea how I didn't panic or act flustered. I'd been pulled over for going like 9 miles an hour over the speed limit before, and I'd been freaking out that time. But this day, I had ice in my veins for some reason. A few months ago, I was driving on the IATA at night when out of nowhere, the biggest buck I'd ever seen was in the middle of my lane. I did exactly what you're not supposed to do and swerved, and thankfully managed to keep the rear of my car content with it. I literally shaved that buck's butt. My mirror was folded in. I know you're not supposed to swerve, but I drive a tiny little thing and that buck's body would have gone through my windshield and into mine and my wife's face at 70 miles per hour. My friend and I were in a bar and she was talking to a guy she met on Tinder. When she turned around, I saw him put something into her beer. I walked up, pretended to stumble, and knocked it out of her hand and apologized. Told her I'd buy her next beer, and when we walked over to the bar, I told her what he did. We left right after. Decided to grab a case of beer and play Mario Kart that night instead. I only tagged along because she asked me to, which I'm always perfectly happy to do. Glad that I did. My first ever boyfriend dated me when I was 14 and he was 16. We only dated for 1 week before he took me into the woods and forced me to kiss him. I started to feel icky and broke it off that same day. 5 years later, and I've found out that he's now in prison for inappropriate behavior with minors. A year ago, almost to the day, I was offered a new job. It was exactly what I was looking for and I was really excited. They told me they would email the contract, but after a week I hadn't heard anything. After a lot of chasing, they told me they'd changed the structure of the organization, so the position wasn't available. I have a month's notice for my current job, and if I'd taken the new job, my notice period would have been after the cutoff date for furlough in the UK. The new job was in an industry that collapsed through the pandemic, and the industry I work in now has boomed. If I'd received that email, I probably would have been close to bankruptcy now. Phew, well, there were worse things during the pandemic than a dependable job, even if it wasn't one that thrilled you. Lucky miss. I hit a coyote on I-80 going about 80 miles per hour in the middle of the night in Indiana, coming back to Michigan once. I hit the thing dead on and it somehow went under my car and scampered off and lived. The only damage was my bumper was a little bit cracked, which I didn't care about because the bumper was already a bit messed up, so it was no big deal. There was literally fur all over the bumper. I got lucky. Had it been a buck that I'd hit dead on, there's no way my little old Subaru, myself, my girlfriend, or my sister would have been uninjured. I drove much slower and with much more caution after that. That time where I didn't go along for a ride when a friend of mine was running Green Herb, years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time, and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job, my friend got arrested, and did 30 days in jail. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with my sister on the inside, me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter, the car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us knew what the heck had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound and that our buggy was gone. We found out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy, which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly and it's been over 30 years. I found an explosive device in a National Guard training area when I was 14. It had a little pull string and a metal plate to attach it to a tree. I held the thing in my hand and almost pulled the string, but decided to attach it to the tree instead and put it on a longer pull string. I pulled the string and it blew a 5-inch hole in the tree. The explosion was so loud the police came and it made the local news. They didn't catch me. I would have at least lost one hand, maybe both, or worse. What's the worst example of rich people problems that you've seen? My rich friend has had to respray his car multiple times because a peacock on his lawn keeps seeing his reflection in it and attacks it like crazy. I was pumping gas in a rather dicey neighborhood at a cheap gas station, and this older woman pulls up in her Bentley. She pulls up on the pump ahead of me and cracks her window slightly and asks for me to help. I ask her what she needs. She asks me to pump her gas because she was too scared to do it herself. I ask her what type of gas she wanted and she said the cheapest. I asked her if she was sure, with such a high-end car, did she really want to put in budget gas. She said it didn't matter, since she could easily afford any new car she wanted. So I insert my debit card and she hands me a $100 bill and says keep the change. I fill up her tank and my own 12-gallon Honda Civic tank, and I made about $30 from the change. I finish up at the gas station and jump on the freeway to see my girlfriend at the time, and I'm going the same way as this woman. I get off at the same exit as this woman. She's making a right to an affluent area, and I'm making a left off the exit to a less nice area. She rolls down the window and yells at me, "I thought you were following me." "I'm sorry, where are you heading?" I told her which neighborhood I was going to, and she gave an awkward smile and says, "I'll tell the dispatcher that you're not following me and that I'm not fearing for my life." The B-word called the cops on me, thinking I was following her to rob her. I ended up getting to my destination, chill with my girlfriend, and I didn't get pulled over. I work at a hotel, and whenever I valet a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, I just think of this old lady. Stuff like this is why if I ever do get to a level of income that could be considered rich, why I won't flaunt it. I wouldn't want to be a paranoid aging dragon of a person clutching my pearls at every turn, while simultaneously trying to show off the same pearls. I knew someone who traded in his Porsche and brought a new one every year. His parents were wealthy and died when he was in his teens, and left him a multi-million-dollar trust fund. What was sad was that he felt like he couldn't pick up women without flashing his cash and expensive sports car, but he would dump them all in a couple of weeks because they were only into me for my money. The loneliest guy I've ever met. And he's not Batman, by the way. His parents died in a car accident and his butler's name is Davin, not Alfred. My wife is a flight attendant. Wife: "What would you like to drink?" Passenger: "I'll have a water." Wait, where is your water from?" My wife: What? What country is your water from? I only drink water from France." Well, I knew the topic would be full of stuff that made me angry, and after this batch, I'm already fuming. Oh well, on to more of these fools with more greenbacks than sense. I went to a fine dining restaurant a few years back that offered us a chance to look at their water menu before dinner. My wife immediately said no because obviously we're not ordering fancy water off the water menu. I'm still kind of disappointed that we didn't at least look at it. That would have been hilarious. Complaining about your allowance from your daddy at age 30, which is the rough equivalent of 2 average salaries. Or complaining that your dad brought you a used car instead of a new one when you were 21, and he only spent $10K. The girl could have been thankful that he even bought her a car. I knew people who brought a new yacht because the wife didn't like the beds on the old one. I knew some who brought a new yacht because the old one had ants and they couldn't find the hive. I mean, this one's a little more understandable. F ants. I would have set the thing on fire. Girl in college lost $6,000 in traveler's checks, but doing the paperwork to have them replaced was too much bother for her. I had friends who had to break their phone. It was the latest iPhone model and perfectly working, but there was a newer one coming out that they wanted, and their parents would only buy it if their other one was broken. I had to endure these kids throwing their phones against walls and being frustrated that their phone wasn't broken yet. My friend wants to marry her boyfriend. They're going to school in America but are both from China, her from Beijing and him from near Shanghai. They both pay $60,000 a year to go to high school here. However, she can't marry him because his family only owns 2 houses in Hangzhou, whereas hers owns 7 in Beijing. My rich aunt doesn't let us park in front of her house because it makes her mansion look bad. When I was in high school, my family was pretty poor and I had a fairly rich friend. My single dad spent years saving up for us to go to Disneyland. We finally went when I was 16. Fast forward a year, my friend is going to Disneyland for Halloween break. Her dad told her to invite 2 friends, so she invited me and another girl. I was freaking stoked, but she kept saying, "I don't know, it's probably going to be boring. My grandma takes me to Disneyland like every break." And when we got there, all she wanted to do was sit on benches and text. All of the rides were boring, and she had already been on them dozens of times. It ended up being pretty boring for me because I didn't want to go on the rides without her. A young girl, about 5 years of age, was getting ready to go into New York City to visit her grandmother, New Jersey suburbs. She was at her aunt's house and didn't have a pair of shoes that she liked. She called her chauffeur, told him which pair of shoes she wanted, and the guy got the shoes and drove some 20 miles to deliver them. And she told him he got the wrong ones and he was an idiot. No one in the family thought this was inappropriate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a rich kid becomes a spoiled, entitled brat. Watch The Queen of Versailles. It's riveting and it's all about rich people problems. And it's not about Marie Antoinette, as the title would suggest. It's a documentary about a ridiculously rich family before and during the Great Recession, and the effect that the housing crisis had on them. A person I know only drinks Evian or Voss water because he's allergic to tap water. I'm not ripping on him for not drinking tap, but for only drinking what is regarded as luxury water. He lives in a wealthy neighborhood in America. I just find it crazy that he'll only drink certain kinds of bottled water. My cousin's best friend yelled at her dad and said she hated him because he wouldn't take her to London to buy a dress, even though the exact same dress was available from the exact same store back home. She needed the one from London because they just make things better over there. I know someone who has to buy all the surrounding plots of land to get some privacy. Of all the things on here, this makes the most sense to me. You really can't put a price on privacy. Sure you can. It's the cost of all the land surrounding you. Local billionaire Paul Allen wanted to put a helicopter landing pad on his waterfront compound on Mercer Island several years ago, but the city said no. So Paul Allen had a custom-made helicopter landing pad ship built that motors out 100 yards into the lake beyond the city's jurisdiction whenever Paul wants to take off or land via helicopter. Zoning regulations are for normies, apparently. Well, as petty and obnoxious as that is, I've looked up Mercer Island and at least the result is just one obscenely rich person making other rich people angry. I hope the engineers who designed that custom boat charged him a fortune. A super yacht docked in Italy at high-end marina. Owners wanted the bottled Perrier water for a party they were having in a day or two. They wanted the marina to supply them with a pallet of said water. The marina said it was against policy for them to get a pallet of water to their boat. So these people got a private jet from America to fly in pallet of said water and got it dropped to the boat. The price was about $28,000 as far as I remember, but even that amount seems a bit low for that. I had to help a girl pay her tuition bill and she was upset because she genuinely thought the process of putting in credit card information was too difficult. Yeah, she took her dad's credit card and paid $20K for the semester like it was buying a stick of gum. I'd put my tuition on my parents' credit card if I could. $40K of purchases would give them a nice pile of points, and I'd obviously transfer them the money to pay it off. Drove a client's wife home from the airport after the big snowstorm in Boston this year. I felt so bad as she told me, "Oh, Roger is so sad. They could only clear the snow from in front of 2 of our garage bays. He wanted to take his BMW out, but he's stuck driving my Mercedes for another week." Oh, well, how does he go on? I went on an amazing trip to the southern US with my girlfriend at the time during the summer, and she had an uncle who was very rich, and she was used to all his wealth. I wasn't. I couldn't believe that we got to do all of these amazing things that we did. Money was just not an object or something you had to worry about. The 3rd day of the trip, I was getting aboard his yacht. He owned the largest one in the club, and it was incredible. Glass stairs, stone walls, and dark, beautiful wood. We all sat down near the back at a table and his wife freaked out. She yelled, "Where are the mats?" Apparently there were supposed to be mats set down on the table before the giant glass bowl of chips and freshly made guacamole could be placed in front of us. She was really mad and almost embarrassed. I've never been so weirded out by someone's anger. I couldn't believe it was such a problem to her. I said to myself, "It's fine. Seriously, I could walk in there and grab them in 4 seconds." I'll never forget, and I learned that extremely rich people don't have the same kind of problems that regular people do. I was once friends with a Chinese girl whose family net worth appeared to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. She told me a story about her rich uncle who owned a super yacht and loved to travel around the world. Apparently his favorite thing to do was pull up into a port and bathe in the stares of everyone admiring his yacht, since it was always the biggest one. Well, one day he goes somewhere, say the Bahamas, and he pulls into the port, and he isn't getting the usual attention since someone else happens to have a bigger yacht than him for once. This girl said it ruined his whole weekend. He was in a terrible mood and couldn't enjoy anything. I was speechless. Also, this girl is the same one that is constantly complaining about how all her friends aren't that smart or nice, and how she doesn't know what to do with all her free time and money. The girl taught me something. Apparently there are a lot of rich people that have so little problems they just make them up. And yeah, I've seen her Facebook pictures, met her friends, seen her cars, and talked to her for long enough to confirm that she probably isn't lying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a former friend who went into despair because Hurricane Sandy flooded her living room of her childhood home. Told everyone she was homeless now, and she knew what it felt like to lose everything the way her Jewish ancestors did in World War II. Thing is, she owned another apartment that she lived in on the island. Her parents owned several more vacation homes up and down the coast. They were a little inconvenienced maybe, but far from homeless. I worked for a girl who had a speaker go out in her Ferrari, and she refused to drive any further under these circumstances, so she pulled over to wait for one of her house staff to bring her Porsche. True story. I was invited to a graduation party hosted by a very wealthy couple whose daughter had just graduated from Yale. Her father came out in front of the guests, displaying his Rolex and Cartier watches, asking which one of the 2 expensive watches the group thought would be the more appropriate for the occasion. Everyone just looked at each other silently, not quite sure what to say. Back when the recession hit, one of my very best friend's family was very distraught because they had to sell one of their 3 private jets. I occasionally hung out with a kid whose dad was super rich. He would just ask for money and get it. He tried to use an ATM and had no idea how to, so he asked me or someone else to get the money for him. It was so confusing for him. Most simple tasks were because he was raised to not lift a finger. I knew a guy who had a friend or roommate like that. He recognized the opportunity and had kind of turned himself into an informal personal assistant. He took care of all the details of making things happen for his rich kid friend, while skimming a reasonable living for himself. The way he described it, it didn't sound like he was doing anything unethical. He was just maximizing his friend's enjoyment of spending his allowance, part of the cost of which was paying for his time managing the details of setting up parties, trip planning, researching products, and other things. Honestly, back in the day I'd kind of thought about whether I would enjoy being a butler-type figure for someone rich. I can see the charm in the lifestyle. I enjoy looking after people and cooking and being useful. But then I realized that the kind of client or duties you end up with would really be such a roll of the dice, with some potentially unpleasant results in terms of people and workload. I worked for a non-profit that helped extremely low-income women start their own business. These women would give up food to scrape together enough money to join our program. One of our EDs said she wished she could relate to the clients more, but she's never been poor. She owned 2 homes in one of the most expensive zip codes in the US. Also, another woman, who I really did respect but I didn't always agree with, believed people chose to be in poverty. We would debate for days about that statement. I realized working there that people who run advocacy programs for poverty have no idea what it's really like to be in it. This is a problem because policy and lawmakers are looking at these institutions for advisement on drafting new social safety nets and welfare programs to help the working poor, and they just have no clue. It motivated me to go back and get a master's degree to fight this. I grew up super poor and can speak from experience, not theory. My boss complained to me recently that they owned too much land and too many properties. She's like, "Don't own too much land and properties. It's just a hassle." A kid I know claimed he wasn't rich, saying, "I don't get to pilot my helicopters as much anymore." The guy sitting next to him, when prompted to define an income bracket for middle class, couldn't answer. He eventually arrived at a $700,000 annual income as a rough estimate. I live in the part of my country where internet is really expensive. 16 megabit per second plans are considered plans for extremely rich people. One fine day, one of my friends threw a fit at his dad because he was getting 15 megabits per second instead of 16 for like an hour. I mean, holy crap, I live on a 2 megabit per second connection, which turns into 512 kilobits per second connection after a 30 gigabyte data cap. I just moved to a 50 megabit per second from a 2 megabit per second. Life is not the same anymore. I saw a guy on Instagram who couldn't wait for a car he custom ordered, so he went and bought one from the dealer while he waited for the custom one. My old boss did this. He ordered a brand new BMW M5, and while he was waiting for it to be delivered, he brought a nearly new Maserati Quattroporte. When the BMW arrived, he had no more need for the Maserati, so he sold it, and bought a Bentley Flying Spur with the money. This is the same guy who brought a Ferrari 575 Super America and drives it around like it's an everyday car. I don't know if this is a problem exactly, but I was on the tube in South London and a bunch of young banker types in fancy suits were there with their equally well-dressed arm-candy girlfriends. And one guy was like, "Everyone keeps telling me to get a Bentley, but I'm more of a Lambo man." This was at a point in my life where I was living off $1 boxes of pasta from Tesco, so it was a bit of a surreal moment. Oh man, I work at a place where I interact with a lot of rich people. I've come into contact with lots of rich people problems. Here's a few that I've witnessed. I overheard some ladies saying, "Oh, they can be expensive, but buying nicer cars like Porsches and Mercedes is worth it. We had a GMC once and we only drove it for like 4 years, and we had to have something fixed, and it just felt old." Also, a mum saying, "I took her to a little friend's birthday party, but I didn't know what to bring. Do kids like Coach bags still? I have no idea." Some other ladies, "So what are you ladies doing this summer?" "Oh, nothing. Last summer was crazy, so this summer we're taking it easy. We're spending 1 week in London and 1 week in Hawaii. But other than that, nothing. We're relaxing this summer." And finally, a 14-year-old kid who looked despondent, and when I asked him what was wrong, he replied, "We're going to Paris again. I hate it. It's so boring." There are many more, but those are a few. My London friend is having a baby, and she's upset that Jimmy Choo doesn't make diaper bags. My mum works at a Baptist church. The pastor makes somewhere between 90 to 100K a year with all of his insurance and gas paid. He is rich as heck, owns 2 homes and has a ton of money on top of his salary. When he takes mission trips and pastor conventions, he holds offerings to pay for his airfare and everything else. Meanwhile, other people that come with him pay their own way. This is a church full of poor and retired people. Well, I'd say that's something you don't hear about all the time, but I'm pretty sure that half the ministers of the megachurches in America are obscenely wealthy and see no fault in wringing out every last cent from their congregation on a regular basis. My buddy had to rent a cabin for his ski trip because his mum just had theirs redecorated for a magazine spread, which hadn't been photographed yet. The same guy couldn't remember which company card he'd put his $4,000 adult nightclub tab on. He really needs an assistant to help keep track of these things. He's interviewed some, but he hasn't hired one yet. Last week was rough. To all those who say they'd want to be his assistant, unless you're a masochist, no, you wouldn't. For every time you'd get to go to that club with the bunch of absolute D-bags he's entertaining, You will have picked his kid up from preschool about 20 times, or double-checked a few reams of paperwork, or stayed on the phone trying to get a hold of some bureaucrat or another, or any of a few other dozen boring tasks that you'll probably have to do 3 at a time. And on top of that, you'd have to deal with King Butthole as your boss. No, not my friend. Inexplicably, he's turned out to be a really good person. No, your real boss would be his dad, who tends to treat everyone that doesn't have at least his net worth worse than garbage, especially his employees. You'd get blamed for every little problem until you're losing your crap and quit, and they'll just pick the next ambitious MBA they could find to take your place. I seriously wouldn't wish that job on my worst enemy. You might think you're tough-minded and could handle it, but you'd be the type that gets broken the hardest. And it would be harder than it should be, because my friend is such a nice guy, and you'd know that if it weren't for you, he'd bear the brunt of it, and those times that are good are really, really good. I'm a nanny for a rich family. A few examples I have. When I get paid, in cash, my boss says, "Oh dear, now I'm going to have to go all the way to the bank to get more cash." Not wanting to go to the bank isn't the annoying rich thing, it was an annoying rich thing because she had $500 still in her wallet, and it was annoying that she was complaining it wasn't enough money to have in her wallet. When they travel, they prefer 2-bedroom suites. One time, they could only get 1 bedroom, and they said, "Well, this just ruins the whole trip." My car got broken into, and I mentioned it felt so awful to drive it knowing someone had been in it. His idea of emphasizing, "Oh, that happened to me. I had to buy a new one." The movie This Is 40. "Honey, we're in debt and both our businesses are operating at a loss." "Okay, let's go spend the night at a nearby luxury hotel and order room service." I was at a marina in the Bahamas to do laundry, stock up on water and supplies with my 25-year-old beta sailboat, and I was walking the dog when I met a guy walking his dog. He was off a 140-foot boat with a substantial, crisply uniformed crew and could not stop complaining how the Bahamas government had charged him $250 for a 6-month cruising permit and fishing license. The same rate I paid, by the way. He went on and on, how they don't have lighthouses or buoys, etc. He had to be paying that much to dock for the night, let alone crew and fuel. Boat probably cost $10 million or more. I ended the conversation by saying that I'd paid more than that for the bottom paint which kept barnacles from growing on my hull. A friend of mine who has considerably more money than me, although admittedly that doesn't take much, was always asking me to come on expensive trips with her, and I had to keep turning her down because I couldn't afford it. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, go on, treat yourself," and I'd have to explain that I literally don't have the money. It's not that I can't or don't want to spend it, it doesn't exist in my bank account. I eventually had to sit her down and explain that I'm poor. I told her about how I couldn't afford to buy much food, so during work days I'd live off the fruit tree and coffee at the office. I showed her how all of my shoes have holes, so I'd line them with plastic bags to stop the rain getting in. I explained that I cut my own hair and washed my own clothes in water with no detergent. I pointed out that I'd long ago put all of my possessions that had any sort of value on eBay. I wasn't trying to get sympathy, I was only trying to explain why for the 100th time I was turning down her invitation for shopping trips or girls' nights or weekends away. She looked at me and nodded in understanding. I know what you mean. Things have been really tight for me recently. I'm so skint at the moment that I've had to cut my weekly manicure and spa days down to just 2 a month. What insane ways has the universe indicated that it could kill you at any time? I once had an elevator drop more than 10 floors rapidly before deciding to work properly. Let me explain. This happened to me at the Land Title building in downtown Philadelphia. I was visiting a friend on the 20th floor, and around floor 15, the elevator suddenly makes a fatigued groaning sound before dropping. Fast. Scared the ever-loving pee out of me as I rocketed down to floor 5 before it slowed, stopped, and reversed course back up again. I noped. I hit the button for every floor so the fricking thing would just let me off, and I walked down the stairs and out of the building. I never did get to visit my friend. What random horrors has the universe subjected you to, only to say, "Haha, got ya," right before the point of no return? And don't tell me this didn't or can't happen. It happened. When I was 10, I was on a helicopter visiting an island off the south coast of England. Everything was going smoothly until the helicopter turns on its side and proceeds to nosedive for a good 10 seconds toward the sea. Needless to say, this had everyone screaming and scared crapless. The helicopter suddenly levels off and the pilot comes onto the PA system and says, "Oh, sorry people, I could have sworn I spotted a dolphin. Won't happen again." I now hate helicopters. I think I've played Battlefield 3 with this guy. I'm a private pilot. One time I was nearing the airport to land. I hit the switch to put the landing gear down and only 2 lights showed up, indicating that the 2 main gears were down, but the nose gear was not coming down as well. So, if all else fails, I'd either have to raise the gear and do a belly landing, or do a landing with only 2 gears, which would be even more dangerous. But first I went back away from the airport to try and work out the problem if possible. I tried raising the gear and re-lowering it. Same problem. 2 lights but no nose gear. Because the gear comes down from the force of gravity, I tried pulling a few Gs to force it down. Nothing. I tried wiggling the rudder since the turning mechanism is connected to the nose gear. Nothing. Maybe a few more Gs? Nothing. Finally, I remembered what the instructor had told me in passing when I was getting checked out in this particular aircraft. The lights for the gear are interchangeable, so that if one is burnt out, you can switch them around. So I went to switch them just in case the nose gear light was burnt out. As soon as I touched the light to change it, it came on. Whew. In the end, the light wasn't all the way into the socket, and that's what the problem was. I did a low pass over the tower so they could visually check that the gear was down just to be sure. I landed successfully in the end. In conclusion, landing gear wouldn't come down on my plane. Turned out that the light showing the gear's position was faulty, and I discovered it as I was at the end of my options before deciding on an emergency gear-up landing. I have a feeling that anyone who's entertaining ideas of getting their pilot's license is probably going to get a good brief of things that might put them off that particular vocation here. It's definitely not something for the light-hearted. I once studied abroad in Cyprus, and during Thanksgiving break I decided to go to Spain for the week. No one else wanted to go, so I went alone. It was incredible. I saw Madrid, Toledo, Sevilla, Granada, and Barcelona, in that order. I was supposed to take a bus back to Madrid to catch my flight back to Cyprus the next day. When I got to the bus station with all of my luggage, to take the last bus of the night around midnight, I noticed my wallet had been stolen. I had it when I got on the subway, so between getting on the subway and 10 minutes later when I got off and walked to the bus station, someone had taken it from me. My cash, debit card, and credit card were all stolen. I had no way of making purchases. My prepaid phone was out of minutes. I was effectively homeless in a foreign country. I went into the nearest bar where I told the bartender my story. He drove me back to his place after his shift ended at 3 a.m. He looked up the next available train and gave me €150 to pay for said train, subway tickets, and food. He drove me to the train station, I got on the train and made my flight the next day. I've since wired him back his money. If it weren't for his kindness, I'd be living on the street in Barcelona begging for change. How about the next time this happens, if you don't find a nice bartender, you go to the embassy before panhandling? I was studying abroad on a cruise ship, semester at sea program, and crossing the Pacific in the middle of winter. Spent about a week pitching and rolling on 30 to 40 foot high waves. It wasn't uncommon to pitch 45 degrees to the right, only to get tossed back 45 degrees to the left. At one point, we got caught between 2 bad storms and hit with a rogue wave. It was over 80 feet high and crashed out the windows on the bridge and caused some electrical issues that stopped our engines. Tremendous damage to the rest of the ship. I was sleeping at the time and my bed ripped out of the wall. We prepared to abandon ship into lifeboats, and I knew that we were all dead if we did that, as the Coast Guard was about a day out and there was no way the lifeboats would survive the rough waters. Literally, as we're getting ready to go out on deck and board the lifeboats, one of the engines starts working again and we don't have to evacuate. We literally zigzagged our way to Hawaii and spent 2 weeks chilling while the boat was repaired. I was once young and kind of a moron. My friends and I loved to play in construction sites. Many of the neighborhoods in the area I grew up in were just being developed. Anyway, so we're messing around and we see these dump trucks dumping lots of black dirt, topsoil for lawns. So we're playing on the dirt piles, being little monsters, when a truck backs up and dumps a full truckload of dirt right on me. Even as a little nerd, I understood the immediate, overpowering, screaming urge to get the frick out now. I was running, scrambling, falling on this moving dirt pile, trying to reach the edge before it buried me completely. Which it did. I thought the classic line, "Oh, this is how I die. Weird." Just my hand was sticking out when the dirt stopped pouring. I immediately felt my friend's hands clawing the dirt away, and it couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt like eternity. I now understand the reason why people get trampled and whatnot in disasters. I don't like to think about it, but I probably would have pushed my own mother out of the way. I was so overcome with a singular thought: survive. When I was about 15, I took a trip to Vermont with my grandparents and my similarly aged cousin. We decided to go to one of those scenic overlooks that's nearby. It turns out to be a 50-foot-tall waterfall. Scenic overlooks not really being our thing, my cousin and I decided to ditch the geezers and climb around behind the fall and check out the view from the top. We make it up there, grab onto a tree, and waved our arms madly to catch the attention of the old folks. At the same time they glance up, my cousin slips towards the falls. I grab him but end up losing my footing and falling into the water myself. As the rushing water carries me towards what I assume to be our imminent death, my right foot gets caught between a couple of larger rocks and the water pushes me upright. I find myself standing not 15 feet from the edge of the falls, grandparents in plain sight, and I start yelling at them to take a picture. At that point, I was almost literally crapping my pants. I don't know if anyone else has seen their grandmother screaming in utter terror, but I honestly hope not. My cousin pulled me out with a large branch a few moments later, and we were in serious crap. After the crisis-averted stage, we joined my grandparents on the wooden overlook. Clearly visible from that side of the falls was a giant sign on which all of the names of the people who had died from falling off said waterfall were printed. In conclusion, almost fell off a waterfall, but my leg got caught and saved me. I took a mastodonic bowel movement at a girlfriend's parents' house, and after flushing, as the water level rose and rose and rose, I looked frantically for a plunger. Her family must have been small, delicate poopers, because there was not a plunger to be found. The water level got right to the tip-top and stopped. Fortunately, there was a wire hanger on a hook on the wall. I fashioned it into a makeshift plumbing snake and I rooted out the clog. I rinsed the business end in the sink and reassembled the wire hanger as best as I could. Pulled up my pants, washed my hands, and a spritz of Febreze to kill the stench. Crisis averted. I can't help but notice that the stakes on this last one weren't quite as high as some of the others, but I do recognize the terror of doing this kind of thing in a high-pressure social situation, and I appreciate that it probably felt like a life-threatening situation at the time. I once fell through the ice when I was around 11 years old and I didn't know how to swim. I flailed around wildly and started screaming at the top of my lungs. Then I noticed that the water was only about chest high. Still, it was a fricking cold walk home. I'm surprised I didn't get hypothermia. About 10 years ago, I went for a routine clinic screening because I'm responsible and stuff. The doctor comes out with that horrible bad news face that they all seem to get and just stands in front of me for a minute, clearing his throat and looking uncomfortable. He starts to say something twice while looking at the chart. I'm afraid that, well, it isn't good. He clasps the chart in front of him and appears ready to say something. I glance at it quickly and make out the words transmitted and disease a few times. Suddenly, a nurse kind of jogs out of the office, takes the chart from the doctor and hands him another one, gives me a smile and then walks back inside. The doctor looks at the new chart, grins like a kid given the day off school and says cheerily, "Well, looks like you're all clean." A friend of mine and I were kayaking in the Gulf of Mexico, and I thought we were about to be eaten by sharks. We saw like 6 dorsal fins approaching, and it wasn't until they were about 10 feet away that we realized they were dolphins. You weren't out of the woods. Dolphins love to play, except play for a 600-pound lump of high-speed, ocean-going muscle is not the sort of thing your bones will take much of. You're all, "Look at me, I'm a helpless sack of bones who can't swim with skinny, brittle appendages." And the dolphin is like, "Ah, sweet, bro, let's do flips. I'll totally throw ya, since I weigh 4 times as much and I don't really have a mental concept of broken arm on account of not really having arms." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was once driven off the highway by a woman driving a minivan and simultaneously doing her makeup. I drove for a while in the grassy median zone before being able to jerk back onto the highway. When I looked at the lady again, she looked sad and apologetic, sort of like a puppy when it knows it's chewed on your favorite sandals. Doesn't change the fact that she almost killed me, of course. I had a stroke at the age of 22 in September, but no permanent damage. Real funny, universe. I've got 2. I was trapped on an escalator for 10 minutes one time between 2 floors. I thought I wasn't going to make it. The second one was when I was on an overnight flight coming home. Not many people, and an off-duty flight attendant was in the window seat, asleep. We're on final approach and over the end of the runway when the plane suddenly rolls what feels like 90 degrees. I guess it couldn't have been that steep, but the overhead luggage racks pop open and some loose bags go flying, and before anyone can even scream, the place rolls back level and lands. Maybe 10 seconds tops. The flight attendant wakes up and looks around, and we make eye contact, and I swear she says, "New pilot." I was totally stunned and pretty sure I peed my pants. Taking a trip through the mountains with the wife, now my ex-wife, in the biggest piece of crap car we'd ever owned. We were about 4 hours from home, going through a small town, when the brakes fail. Thankfully, the car was a 5-speed manual, so I start shifting down to slow down. I spotted an auto parts store while I was coasting, judged it just right and pulled in and parked using the building to finally stop the car. It was a very gentle tap. I then proceeded to jack the rear of the car up and investigate. The rear brakes were completely shot, including the wheel cylinders. Went into the store, bought what I needed for repairs, new brake shoes, cylinder rebuild kits, and some brake fluid. I then proceeded to do a brake job on my car with nothing more than a Leatherman and a full-size, flat-tip screwdriver. This was a mum-and-pup parts store, no loaner tools. I was back on the road within the hour. I guess this was more of a "frick you, universe" story. Years ago, I was taking a break from kayaking, swimming in a river with a bunch of people all around me. I was next to a big pipe running under the water, actually called pipeline. Still not sure the exact reason for the pipe, but I was slowly being pulled to the left. Not thinking of it much, I let it pull me when all of a sudden I'm completely submerged, being sucked down into it. But a random metal rod jabbed into my chest. I hung on to it for dear life with one hand and with the other hand reached out of the pipe to feel around, and I actually feel a handle to pull myself out. When I got out and sat on top of the pipe, I looked around and noticed that everything was crystal clear, and no one had even noticed that I'd almost died right then. Quite the thrill. In Iraq, an IED had gone off on the lead vehicle of the convoy. Once the medevac was called in, another Marine and I went to check the kill zone and the area around the LZ. After a few minutes of looking for wires or detonators, I realized I was standing on a sandbag in the median road. I'd walked on about 7 other sandbags. It was the remains of the IED that had hit the lead vehicle. It was a daisy chain where only one went off. I was walking on them. That was a real pucker factor. The only thing I can think of is a 5.7 earthquake in a building rated for 6. For some reason, I just pictured all buildings having an official rating, and if a quake goes over that rating, the building disintegrates immediately. I have no idea why I find the idea amusing. When I was 16, I started taking birth control pills. A month later, right before my spring break, my left hand started to turn purple and got incredibly painful. At the hospital, after many tests, they found I had a blood clot from damn birth control. They perform an angiogram to search for any more clots. In the process, they discover a freak genetic deformity. I had extra rib bones growing off my spine, and they were pushing on my main artery under my clavicle, resulting in 2 aneurysms, one on each side. After a handful of surgeries, discarding rib bones and removing the aneurysms, they tell me I'm lucky to be alive. The best spring break ever. In short, taking birth control saved my life. I know many people who would echo the same sentiment, but for very different reasons, so congratulations. I hope you found a control method that worked for you. Coming back home from Iraq after my second tour, we stopped in Newfoundland in January. Blizzard-like conditions, we're taking off, and as soon as we get off the ground, the plane falls back onto the runway. The pilot comes on over the net and says, "Well, that was a little weird. We're gonna try and pull off and make sure that everything is okay." Rev up the engines, and then went around for another try. I figured after a 16-month tour, surviving multiple IED attacks, countless firefights, this is where I die, in Canada. Obviously, I made it back okay. But still, flying scares me. One time the brakes went out in a 15-year-old used car I used to own. Of course I was speeding and the light turned yellow. I hit the brakes and they didn't work, but then they locked up. I did a massive 180-degree going all the way across the intersection, coming to a complete stop perpendicular to a car, staring the driver in the face. I laughed, turned around and drove slowly the rest of the way home. I have one. I got stranded in the Salt Lake Airport once. I was looking at a 23-hour wait for my flight home to Boston, due to snowfall. Suddenly, after repeatedly asking the clerk to find us an alternate route, one opened up that would get us out of Salt Lake and give us an 8-hour layover in Vegas instead. I went from my worst airport moment ever to my greatest in the span of an hour. That clerk is my hero. Part 2, the Vegas to Boston flight ended up having us fly very near major storms in Texas and Oklahoma. The pilots let us know there's going to be turbulence. I somehow find it in me to fall asleep. I woke up with a massive thud from turbulence, and about a second later the plane begins to fall. I went weightless, and my seatbelt kept me strapped in. My wife let out a scream, so do others. I think, this is it, this is how it happens. And then, we regained control. The whole event lasted about 5 seconds. Turbulence backs off a few minutes later and we make it to Boston safe and sound. So, in conclusion, stranded in Salt Lake due to a blizzard. That's bad. Rerouted to Vegas with 8 hours to rip it up. That's good. Plane home to Boston starts falling from the sky. That's bad. Plane levels off and everyone hugs each other. Can I go now? I used to work in a fiberglass testing lab around buckets and buckets of the most flammable stuff you can imagine. Gasoline, ethanol, methanol, etc. There were open 5-gallon buckets of the stuff everywhere on the floor, and the walls were jammed with cabinets holding dozens of metal canisters of explosive liquids in storage. The job was dull. By the vent hood, we kept an old radio plugged into the hood sparkless outlet, and it was our sole entertainment. One day, a guy wheeled past in his chair and caught the radio cord. 5 of us watched the radio, still plugged in, bounce and teeter on the rim of a full 5-gallon bucket of xylene, then slowly pirouette away from the rim and hit the floor. A couple of millimeters to the left and we would have been vaporized. My supervisor, Jerry, one of the least flappable people ever, looked at us and said calmly, "We're gonna need to tape that to the wall." My girlfriend and I were driving to Vegas from San Francisco via Death Valley in a rental car. We were visiting the country. Anyway, we were 30 miles into Death Valley at around 6 p.m. when I realized we probably wouldn't have enough gas to make it to the next gas station, which was roughly 100 miles away. So after driving for another half hour or so, the blinking lights came on, indicating we were on reserve fuel. My girlfriend starts freaking out because our cell phones have no service, and there isn't anyone who we knew to call anyway. So we stopped at the deserted RV park in the middle of Death Valley to try and get some help, all while genuinely fearing running into a bunch of crazy hobos and getting robbed, kidnapped, or murdered. So anyway, the place is devoid of people, so we continue driving on reserve towards Beatty, Nevada. Eventually, the car grinds to a halt and we end up having to pull over to get help. We try flagging down cars for 45 minutes to no avail, until finally some truck that passes us suddenly pulls over and backs up to us. I explain our predicament to him and beg him to drive us to Beatty and back. By this time it was dark and the guy, a really friendly-looking Latino dude, senses that we're desperate and does us the favor. When we actually got to the gas station in Beatty, my girlfriend was so relieved that she started crying. I proceeded to buy a 2-gallon watering can and filled it up with gas. Later, the guy drives us all the way back. He did roughly 40 miles there and back to our car. At this point, I was so grateful that I offered him $200, to which he flat out refused and even offered to tail us to Beatty in case we ran out of gas again. We managed to get to Vegas in the end after being on the road for about 14 hours. But this incident really shook us, but also reminded us that there are truly good Samaritans out there. Jose, if you ever come across this post, I just want to let you know you're an awesome guy. I was on a Navy C-2, a propeller plane, flying back to the carrier with the mail. There are no windows in the cargo section of this plane. Suddenly, in mid-flight, I'm blinded with bright daylight and roaring wind all around me. In a split second, I'm in the crash position out of reflex. I open my eyes and see the sunlight on the floor with bits of newspaper and dust being thrown about by the wind. I hear the engines start to wind down and I feel like the seatbelt is the only thing keeping me from floating out of the seat as the plane starts to plummet. This lasts for a few seconds, but then the plane levels out and the aircrew guys are moving around me. One of them asks if I'm okay and if it hit me. It turns out an overhead escape hatch had come unlatched and landed in the row of seats in front of me. What was your best moment of, "Oh, I'm actually the bad guy here"? I used to work security at a college bar, and we would typically ask people to leave who were too intoxicated. One night I was posted up in the DJ booth because it was our normal shoulder-to-shoulder level of busy, and I watched this guy start stumbling and drinking his beer in a really weird way. I make my way over to him and tell him he has to leave because he's too drunk. He tries to tell me something, but I can't understand what he said because the music is so loud and he was slurring his words. We get outside and he tells me that he has cerebral palsy, which was pretty obvious after the fact. He was cool about it and I let him back in, but I don't think I've ever felt like a bigger jerk than that night. I have a buddy who has muscular dystrophy. Once, while in the liquor store, he had a bout of paralysis and collapsed. The reaction from everyone in there was along the lines of, "Oh great, another drunk," until he told them he has muscular dystrophy and physically can't get up. He said it was kind of funny watching them to all scramble to help him after that. You know when you get in an argument with someone and you come up with the perfect solution for the situation after the fact? About 2/3 of the trains I get on from Dublin to Cork, someone is sitting in a pre-booked seat that doesn't belong to them, whether it's mine or another person. And these people have all been cantankerous old geezers who have no desire whatsoever to shift themselves from a seat they didn't reserve. I had a man who was probably in his 80s stand up to his full height, a foot shorter than me, and bellow in my face that he didn't care that I booked the seat. He wasn't moving, while his shrew wife looked on with an air of proprietorial approval. It's pretty rotten. Finally, however, last month I boarded a train and someone was sitting in my seat with his partner. And I was just the right combination of tired and stressed to let him have it. I'd been waiting for months for my moment. I showed him my ticket, told them it was my seat, and insisted they move. I channeled Seinfeld for the first and hopefully last time in my life, and finally stormed off up the train when they continued to sit in my seat, full of righteous vindication that I was going to get my way. Finally, I was going to get one over on the train. No longer shall I back down to the whims of rude commuters. Now it is they who shall yield to the righteous powers of reservation. I went up to the staff cabin, asked for an administrator, told him the situation, and presented him with my ticket. This was met with, I see the problem here, sir. You've reserved a seat on the 6 o'clock train. This is the 4 o'clock train. I'd booked the ticket for 6 p.m. and become mixed up with the 6 in the 1600 or 4 p.m. train. I was mortified. I meekly took a seat near the opposite end of the train and didn't say a word to anyone else for the next 3 hours. In my quest to defeat the rude commuter, I had become what I hated most. The narrator, a mostly very diplomatic person, also feels like the 1 or 2 times he's decided to stand up for himself in his life, he has completely misjudged the situation and looked like a complete moron. Ah well. Pulled out of the gas station and this butthole was riding my bumper, honking his horn and waving and pointing. I pulled over, throwing my arms up ready for the altercation because I'd done nothing wrong. Turns out I drove off without closing my gas cap. Wasn't really such a big deal for how he was acting, but he was just trying to help. I apologized and thanked him. In high school, there was a kid who I unwittingly bullied. I actually thought he was a cool guy, and my friend group and I roughhoused a lot. Headlocks, finger circle game, dead legs, etc. I was just doing what I did with everyone I get along with. One day I came up behind him and did that thing where you kick someone's back leg into their front leg while they're walking and they trip on their feet. He turned around with fear and anger in his eyes and yelled, "Why do you have to be such a jerk to me all the time?" My heart sank to my feet. I didn't realize that what I saw as friendly bonding play he found really intimidating. We talked it out and I spent the rest of my high school days being really nice to him. The weirdest part is that he was a pretty popular kid, not small by any means, and on a couple of different sports teams. Goes to show, anybody can feel bullied. I have a coworker who jokes around with nearly every coworker. But not me. A few years ago, I was tired and in a bad mood and trying to clock in. She was joking around with me and trying to keep me from clocking in. I thought she herself was just taking a really long time to clock in, but I lost my temper and I yelled, "Will you hurry up already?" She's never joked around with me or even been that friendly with me since. Realizing that the reason my partner and I are always fighting is because I'm always picking fights. I'm still working on trying to fix this. I was at a restaurant doing a coworker dinner thing when I noticed the woman at the next table was staring me down, like barely blinking, full-blown eye contact. After a while, I started getting pretty agitated when my subtle social cues to stop staring at me went wholly ignored. After about 20 minutes of this, I'd had enough of this lady's unsolicited rudeness, and I did the whole "come at me, bro" arms in the air move, thinking that surely that would get my point across. I made a fairly big production of it. Only then did I realize that this lady was completely blind. When my sister was 13 and I was about 10, we were in a food court at the mall. A gentleman wearing a black suit and dark glasses was seated next to us. My sister looks at him, back to me, and says, "Hey, I think that guy's in the FBI or something." I was like, "He's blind," and the blind guy tried to suppress a smile. Went to a friend of a friend's house to chill out. He was a nice kid, but his house was crazy dirty. Dishes stacked to the ceiling, laundry strewn like carpet, old takeout food bags from a ton of places everywhere. bags of garbage just lying in piles in the kitchen. The place stunk to high heaven, and I had trouble getting comfortable. Later, I commented on how dirty the place was to my friend. Turns out the guy's mum was terminally ill, and the guy had to help take care of her and his younger sibling, all while being a typical teenage boy. I felt bad for judging him. 2 weeks ago, I was dropping someone off at Union Station. As I was exiting the parking lot, there was one of those gate things where you insert your ticket. I inserted my ticket, and the person behind me began honking. The gate was literally in the process of lifting up. I laid on the horn, screaming, "Okay, I'm going!" But they kept honking anyway. I hit the accelerator and zoomed off, flicking them off for good measure in a very obvious way. I drive a convertible, so I can put my hand right out the top. I was furious at them for honking for me to go, and it was clear that I couldn't go any faster. I exited and turned left. A few moments later, that same car exited and also turned left and pulled up to me. They put down their window and I put mine down. Yes, everyone, you can have windows up while in a convertible. It reduces the effect of the wind. And I was like, "What the frick do you want, huh?" The lady in the other car said, "You left your coffee mug on the back of your car." She wasn't even mad. I was totally shocked. I looked behind me and sure enough, I'd set my tumbler on top of the trunk and she had been honking to try and let me know. I turned red, burst out laughing and told her I was so sorry for being such a jerk. I pulled over and got my cup. I couldn't believe what a butthole I'd been and how coolly she responded to the whole thing. This was my mum's moment. She was driving me and my brother home from the store when we were young, when she drove through an intersection screaming, "You've got a stop sign, lady," out the window at a person that she nearly hit. 10 seconds later, my mother realized that she was in fact the one who blew through a stop sign. All she did was, "Oh." Like any good kids, we still to this day yell, "You've got a stop sign, lady," at her. I was driving home one day and a person in the car next to mine waved at me. I went to wave back, and my hand instinctively flipped the other person off instead. Holy crap, you're like a reverse Mr. Bean. Mr. Mean. Used to think it was funny to quote Dodgeball and say, "You're adopted, your real parents don't even love you." I wish I could say that I learned my lesson the first time when I said this to someone who responded with, "Actually, I am adopted." I won that particular lottery twice. The narrator has been witness to not one, but two yo mama jokes, in which the recipient turned out to have lost said parental figure recently. It just feels like tempting fate to use any sort of parent-related joke these days. It was the moment I realized that I was in fact responsible for everything I did while mentally unstable. I spent years alienating everyone I knew by demanding that they forgive my crappy behavior because it wasn't me, it was my bipolar disorder. Everyone else was the bad guy because they just didn't understand my illness. I was the victim. One day it just kind of clicked. No matter what the cause, I was the one who was hurting the people around me. It wasn't on them to understand and forgive my endless parade of insanity. It was on me to get help and stop being so toxic to everyone around me. It was that epiphany that really helped me turn the corner. While I'd sought help before, it was always with the mindset that I had no responsibility and therefore no control over my illness. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Dang, this kid that we called Dino Kid because he always acted like a dinosaur at recess. We'd chase him around and poke fun all the time. Nothing big ever happened, but once we, as a class, were educated on ASD, everyone accepted the guy so quickly. The guy was so damn good at Guitar Hero. My fiancé is a 34-year-old man who sometimes, almost every day, acts like a T-Rex stalking me. It's adorable and I love it, but sometimes he gets really self-conscious because he's afraid I'm going to make fun of him for it. I've never in over 3 years together. I think he has dino PTSD. So, one time I was in a high school assembly and a bunch of kids in pajamas started walking into the auditorium. Pajamas were against the school's dress code. Me, thinking I was funny, yelled, "Hey, that's against the dress code." Turns out it was the special ed class. I really felt like a jackass. I couldn't make myself small enough in that crowd. I thought I was saving someone from a bad marriage. I realized I was just convincing them to cheat on their husband. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It wasn't me, but it was amazing to see. I was at Starbucks sitting outside along with a number of other people. A gym rat-looking guy starts drawing attention to himself and pointing at people saying, "Is that white Chevy over there your car?" After a couple of these outbursts, a guy sitting near me says, "Yeah, that's my car." The gym rat righteously said, "You're a royal jerk for parking in a handicapped spot. How can you be so selfish when someone who needs that spot might show up at any time? For all you know, he already drove through the parking lot, couldn't find the space, and he headed back home empty-handed. Blah, blah, blah." The car owner, "I'm sorry, I'm handicapped. I forgot to hang the tag when I left the car." The gym rat, "Oh, really?" At this point, the car owner, who'd been sitting down and showed no signs of handicap, stands up. The guy is basically bent in half, like his spine is fused in a 90-degree angle. He looked perfectly normal sitting down. Okay, I'll go to the car and hang the tag." The gym rat, upon seeing him stand, sorry, you don't have to do that." The car owner slowly and uncomfortably walks the 40 feet to his car, opens the door, fumbles to hang the tag, and then ambles his way back to the seat, rigidly bent the entire time. When I was in grade school, I had a serious problem keeping my mouth shut. Basically, if a thought popped into my head, I was fricking saying it. The teachers didn't exactly appreciate the constant blurting out, but one time I really crossed the line because I made fun of a perfectly sweet girl just because her mum smoked. F you, former self. I was already a problem child, and while I wasn't technically expelled, I did have to leave and go to a different school. So yeah, basically expelled, but off the record. What's worse is that it took about 2 years of sulking for me to finally realize that I had it coming. Every bit of it. Gosh, I can't believe how much of a craphead I was. I was a freshman in high school. I don't know why it occurred to me, but I figured that if you rubbed the little cage that held your books under the desk the right way, it would resonate and make this loud humming sound. I'd sit there and wait for the teacher to turn her back and start. She'd turn around and look at the air conditioner vent that was right above me. Of course, when she did, I would stop. She'd look bewildered and then turn back around. Of course, I would start up again. Being the quiet kid, no one in the class suspected me. It was hilarious. Until they closed the classroom down for a couple of days because they had concerns about the air conditioners malfunctioning. When I was 10 or so, a friend of mine got appendicitis, so the teacher asked us to write letters of support to her. Little me thought I could troll her in the same way I could do in the internet, which isn't even justified online, by the way. So I wrote an entire letter joking about her condition, wishing it got worse, and saying in the end that it's all a joke and I wish she got well. The teacher came to class mad and disappointed, and proceeded to read my letter without saying my name. I instantly knew I'd messed up, and I never did it again. Never did it again? How often do your friends get appendicitis? Actually, last year I got appendicitis, and my friends didn't write prank letters. Oh no. They visited me at the hospital and told me the most effed up jokes, so that when I laughed, my abdominals hurt like a B word after the surgery. Let's just say I got what I deserved. I would say that this seems like a banter thing that the teacher might have misinterpreted, but then again, not many 10-year-olds can pull off that level of dark humor. I know that it's the kind of thing I'd write to certain friends if they were in hospital. I was the assistant manager of a fast food place in college. A bunch of punk rocker-looking guys my age came in to eat, around the same time as some soccer mums with little kids. One of the punk rock kids was pretty intimidating, easily a foot taller than me and built like an athlete. They were all perfectly nice when they ordered their food, but once they got their cups to fill up their drinks, the big guy started screaming and cursing at the top of his lungs, "Mother fricking pig fricker son of a B-word!" The moms all looked horrified. I'm normally quite averse to conflict, so I was quite proud of myself when I marched around the counter and got right up in this big dude's face. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if he had a problem acting like a human being, he needed to get out of my restaurant. He looked back at me and almost started crying. He whispered, "I'm sorry," and turned around and walked away. He looked absolutely destroyed, and his friends followed him trying to console him. Either that guy legitimately had Tourette's, or the whole group of them was pulling a prank, and were absolutely the best actors I've ever seen. Oh gosh, I still feel bad whenever I think about this. So about a year ago, I was on a long international plane flight. I always book the aisle seat because I have a GI disorder that means I sometimes have to get to the bathroom with very little notice, so being trapped in the middle or window seat is suboptimal. I get all seated for my flight, which is the second leg of probably 12 or more hours of travel, and I'm so exhausted I start to nod off before boarding is even finished. I'm awakened by a man politely asking if he can have my seat. Groggily, I explain that no, sorry, I set this up this way because of an illness I have, and I get up so that he can have the window seat. It was a small flight, so no middle seat at least. The nerve of some people, right? If you wanted the aisle seat, why didn't you just choose it beforehand, random dude? The world doesn't revolve around you. Well, about 3 hours into my flight, I woke up again, feeling slightly more human, and I end up having a conversation with my roommate. And within about 5 minutes, I discovered that no, he wasn't asking to switch seats, he was telling me that I was in his seat. Apparently, the airline had switched who was seated where so that he could be closer to his wife and daughter, who was sitting across the aisle. I hadn't looked at my electric boarding pass since going through security, so I didn't notice the change. I apologized profusely and offered to switch immediately, but the poor guy just said it was okay and declined. Ugh. I should probably mention that I'm a short, baby-faced girl, which probably made it worse as this middle-aged guy clearly had no idea what to do about a small, early 20-something girl who looks more like a 12-year-old than anything, telling him he couldn't have his assigned seat. Honestly, that dad might have secretly loved having some personal time. Yep, because of that inconsiderate chick in the aisle seat, I had to do nothing but watch a movie, read a book, and nap for the whole 12-hour flight. Sorry, honey. I've flown a lot with our daughter, sometimes alone and sometimes with my wife. That's not a lot of difference in my opinion, as the main difficulty is just the endless activity and interruptions. It's not difficult as much as relentless. If the kid is in between the parents, neither of them gets much rest. Now, if the poor mom was stuck with 2 kids, then you truly are a monster. In middle school, I pulled some really creepy stuff on a guy I liked, as in an insane amount of physical stalking. I memorized his schedule only through following him everywhere, and I always appeared in the same place he was. I took one of his belongings that he forgot somewhere and took an assignment of his that was posted on the class corkboard because I just wanted his stuff. At the time, it didn't even occur to me that what I was doing was messed up. All I thought about was, how can I be around this person without having to interact with him? It's been over half a decade since then. If I did any of the crap I did as an adult, I would have been arrested with at least a few restraining orders. My friends told me it was messed up, but I refused to listen. I probably did some serious, permanent mental damage to the poor kid. I hope he's managed to recover, and I hope he never has to worry about anything like this again. He deserves the relief. My best friend's younger sister had a weird headband on one day. We were in high school at the time, so she was in middle school. She and my friend didn't really get along, and she was kind of mean to me too, so I saw an opportunity to tease her and said, "Nice headband." Turns out she had cosmetic surgery of some kind to make her ears stick out less, and the headband was there to cover her surgical wounds. I sure felt like a butthole. This actually happened yesterday. It's not that bad of a thing, but I was driving on a road and I saw someone on a side street pull out onto my road right in front of a girl that was trying to cross the street. Immediately, I got teed off that this D-bag almost hit a girl just to be fast. So I followed him for about 30 seconds until he parked, so I drove right up next to him and said, "Hey, butthole, you almost killed that girl back there. What the frick were you thinking?" He looked confused and just said, "Dude, she waved me ahead and let me go. What the frick are you talking about?" Immediately, I started to apologize, telling him that it looked bad from where I was, but yeah, I went from hero to zero real quick. I broke up with a close friend and made up with them recently. I was being emotional and lashed out, questioning their friendship because they wouldn't drop everything they were doing for me. I know now that I'm wrong. My friend has always been there for me, and I still feel bad even though I apologized. I'm a bad friend. Got into a fist fight. We were equally sized and matched, but I came out on top. For those of you who've ever been in a fist fight, you know that line you're not supposed to cross? You know, when the fight should be over, but you throw another punch anyway? I crossed that line. I threw several more punches. I wasn't proud afterwards. I'm not entirely sure this fits, but I'll put it down anyway. I used to be insanely shy and thought everyone hated me for no reason, because they wouldn't talk to me. Turns out I was intimidating because I never wanted to talk, and was too scared to be around them, so they eventually gave up. Since then, I've been trying to make an effort to be nice and say hi to everyone, but I'm still struggling a bit. In first grade, I was making fun of a short boy without realizing I was hurting his feelings. It got to the point where I'd upset him so much he buried his tiny first grade fist right in my stomach. I was left lying on the playground trying to catch my breath. Sort of an eye-opener then and there to treat people the way I wanted to be treated. Good on him for jumping to make sure he actually could get you in the stomach. My dog was barking for no reason and wouldn't stop after I yelled at him 3 times. I turned around and he's at the door looking at me with his derpy face while the neighbor's dog continues to bark. Sorry, bud. A guy kept bumping into me in line at a theme park. I kindly asked him twice to back up a bit and give me some room. The third time I turned right around and raised my voice a little and started to show some irritation. This guy was clearly on the spectrum. Parents and family shuffled him back a few steps and apologized to me. I almost cried from embarrassment. People who've clicked on really risky-looking ads, what actually happened when you committed? My dad, rest him, kept getting viruses on his laptop because of these ads. But it's the specific ones that chat at you by name, you know? So he knew, in retrospect, that these ads were what was messing up his computer, but he kept falling for them because they'd address him by name. So he always figured that it must be someone he knew, because they wouldn't just chat and call him by his first name otherwise, right? Oh, Dad. Oh gosh, I used to work at one of those places that provides captions for hearing-impaired telephone users, and I listened to one side of a call between an old man and his adult daughter. Dad, I told you to not click on those links. No, I'm not replacing another computer for you. I told you not to click on those links. Those are not real girls. It's a scam. Do you really think there are single girls in your area? In North Dakota? You're 85 years old. Why would they want to meet you? It went on a while longer with more in the same vein. It was the second funniest crap I'd heard at that job, even if it was a little sad when the daughter acknowledged that she knew her father was lonely. Used to be one of the people who bought these ads to promote those sites. 90% are cash grabs, populated by bots or paid girls to lead guys on. They have some real users. Most of the users are still bots or hired folk. You might even end up talking to Misty, who is actually Devinder from India. It's cheap to get real humans from developing countries. I clicked on one of them that told me, "This game will make you come in 2 minutes." Out of curiosity. Played some Star Trek derivative game for about 6 months, and it was actually kind of fun. I never came while playing it, though. A couple of years ago, a young guy, he must have been a teenager around 16 or 17, came to my door and told me that he's looking for this girl, who he met through some stupid explicit dating site, and she gave him my address to meet. I told him that I live here by myself, I'm a 28-year-old man, and all of the women who've been here since I moved in here are not from that particular site, I believe. But he was too adamant and was sweating hard by now, so I asked him to come in and sit and gave him a glass of water. Then I asked him how much he had paid for that, and he looked down and said $750. So again, I asked how he'd managed to pay, and he replied, "Mum's card." So after a small unofficial counseling session, I convinced him to call his parents to my place and played a mediator between the two parties. We, all adults, decided to report this to the police since my address was also used for the fraud, and Mother immediately blocked her card. Family invited me for dinner for keeping their son calm during a panicking situation, and we all laughed over a drink after the poor kid went to sleep. Honestly, that's probably the best possible resolution that could have come out of the situation, even with the $750 down the drain. Also, this topic is by its nature going to talk about the kind of content where actors take their clothes off and do the deed together. To avoid getting demonetized, I'm going to use the word prawn instead of the usual one. Case in point, I clicked one of the ads for one of those $1 trials to one of the big-name prawn sites. Reality Kings, maybe. This was a while ago, I don't really remember. I figured I'd see what might make prawn actually worth paying for, and either way, I'd only be out $1. First, it ended up being $2, not because of any weird fees, but they charged my card twice. But I trudged on because, what's $2? And I can complain to them later. So I get their email like, "Thanks for signing up for the trial. Click here to check out our content." I click there. I immediately get 2 more emails being charged twice in the amount of something like $40 each. At this point, I don't even bother. I immediately close everything and fire up their customer support. I tell them that I paid $1 for a trial, got double charged, and proceeded to click on the link given to me in the email thanking me for signing up, and then was instantly double charged $40. The support rep told me I was charged because I went to a premium area not included in the free trial, and by going into that area, I automatically agreed to pay for a full subscription. I told her, no, I clicked on the link you sent me, I'll be taking a refund. She said they don't give refunds. I told her that they'll give me a refund or my bank will be giving me it. Suddenly, they magically gave refunds. I never got the $2 charge back, but $2 to learn that even the big-name prawn distributors will try and screw you out of your money, so I shouldn't ever bother actually paying for that content was all right in my book. A friend in an online game was active military in Afghanistan. He used to joke that he'd see those ads, "Beautiful girl 3 miles from your location wants to meet you," and he'd be like, "Get the frick out of there, you're in danger. This is not the time to be looking for guys on the internet." A serious reply here. One day I was curious, so I just thought, F it, and I signed in with a fake ID. It was some kind of dating site where men are only sporadically allowed. Of course, I was one of the happy few. Fancy that. The site itself seemed like a regular dating site. The main difference was that a ton of ladies were sending me messages. They actually seemed really interested, but obviously they were all bots. They wanted you to sign up for a premium account for a monthly fee, but I was not curious enough for that. It was quite the anticlimax. I like those meet local randy women in your insert small town area because I always think, wait a minute, I am one of those right now, so why aren't they asking me if I want to hook up with guys in my town? My old roommate got scammed by advertisements like this. Bought a book for $50 called The Iron Man's Wang. It gave him exercises and stuff to do to grow his eggplant's size. It obviously did nothing, but he didn't stick with it for very long and gave up. When he told us about it, we told him he was scammed. Where can one find this book? I'm asking for a friend. I clicked on the fruit one, not out of real interest, but just to hear the bullcrap. It was at least a 30-minute PowerPoint slideshow type video with a guy talking about his tiny wang and how it's now huge. He talked about eating this magical fruit from the Congo because black people in Africa are hung, but you have to eat it with certain other fruits. He never mentions any of the other fruits, by the way, and then says he made pills out of the fruit's magical eggplant-growing ingredients. I bought pills for my member, and they gave me stomach issues for about 6 months. I have to admit that I was incredibly surprised that there were hot local singles in my small town. My grandma's boyfriend started paying $7 to send a message, $7 to open a message, to a pretty Thai girl online. They fell in love, so my mother made a fake account and got the same girl to propose to her within a single message. My grandma didn't find out that my mother had done this, but she did see the evidence of the rest, and that boyfriend is no more. I have a story from the other side of this. I used to be a bottle server at a nightclub. I had these regulars who would often come in once, twice, or 3 times a week. They would rack up bills oftentimes as high as $3,000 on a regular basis. They were quite young, probably late 20s. My club charged every card an automatic 20% gratuity. They knew this, but they would always throw in an extra $100 for me. They were almost always on a substance while they were partying, and they often tried to convince me to take some while working. Yeah, fat chance, I love my job. They would get like 6 bottles of champagne and just hand glasses to anyone who walked by. I served them consistently for months. They were always very secretive about what they did to make all that money. Over time, I pieced together enough little bits of information I'd gathered from various members of the group at various times, and finally figured out the source of their wealth. They stole people's identities and credit card information through pop-up ads on adult sites. They were all computer wizards and seemingly worked separately and independently, but had somehow found each other through some underground community meetup of hackers and scammers, if I recall correctly. By then, I believe they'd begun working together quite frequently, but I'm unclear on their working relationship, just not the nature of their business. They claimed to make hundreds of thousands per month doing this, and they certainly spent money like that was the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a gross exaggeration, as I'd caught them embellishing various different things on numerous occasions. I've tried playing the racy-looking games, but they never actually show the fun bits of the body, and they're boring. And it's always a looping gif of some SFM prawn montage of an Overwatch character or something. Or this one, I only remember it now because it made me laugh so much. It was a really crude animation of a guy and a girl doing the deed, and in the background there was a girl with a really large sombrero, really violently strumming on a guitar. It was just so ridiculous looking. I shan't forget it for a while. A channel I used to watch went out of their way to play these sorts of games whenever they popped up, properly censored, of course, for YouTube. It feels like from the amount of censoring going on, a lot of them do actually show naughty bits and the doing of the deed, but maybe they were better at finding those. I was a young 18-year-old lad and bored. I saw the usual ad of click here for fun girls in your area, and I thought to myself that I had fraud protection, so I was all good. The website took my entered card info and immediately started racking up random charges for gift cards and premium hotmail.com services. I guess that's a thing. I called the bank support line, quite nervous as I was paying for adult services and was still uncomfortable talking about that kind of thing. The guy at the bank was a total bro and literally said, "Oh, you lost your card at the mall. I'm sorry to hear that. Let me reverse those charges and get you a new card." Never once had I mentioned a lost card or the mall. Would have been a live customer if they hadn't closed that branch. There was one about psychology of women and how to get laid more often. Spoilers, it's a man on a 30-minute video talking about nonsense. Then at the end, he gloats about his money. I now know the secret to getting laid more often. Find a girl, talk to her about nothing important, tell her I have money, invite her to my place. Apparently it works 2 out of 3 times. I saw an ad about a video on how to do the deed longer while controlling exactly when you splooge. The curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on it. The video was about 34 minutes long. The first 10 minutes was just about a guy talking about how he'll tell you the secret in just a few minutes. He rambled on and on about how he was a loser in college and the army. He talked about how he struggled through basic training, but he managed to power through it by putting mind over matter. So he thought he could try putting mind over matter when it came to doing the deed. He also showed his before and after pics of his time during school in the army. They weren't even the same person, but he apparently takes home 5 different women every week now. Around the 20-minute mark is when he finally revealed the big secret. The big secret to not arriving and lasting longer is to just not think about it. That's it. So when you're in bed with someone and getting close, just don't think about it at all and your problems will be solved. The last 10 minutes of the video was him advertising something completely different that I can't even remember what it was. I think it was a book or something. I was again curious as to the price of the item, so I clicked on the link, but was redirected to a checkout on a shady website asking if I want to go ahead and pay over $2,500 for a lifetime supply of pills for my eggplant. I probably got a ton of viruses, but now I can go on with my life knowing those videos are bogus. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Speaking of sausage enlargement ads, I hate the ads that you see on relatively tamer sites where the ad is like, "Men need to see this," and it shows some weird clamfish thing that resembles a male member. Either way, the answer is inevitably going to be viruses. Not prawns like all the others, but my grandma clicked on one of those "Get a free MacBook Air for filling out this survey" ads. She did the survey and actually got a MacBook Air. I don't know if she got any viruses, fraudulent charges on her card or whatnot, but they did deliver on their promise. I thought it was neat, but I'd never do it myself. I messaged her on Facebook about it, and she said it ended up costing her money with all the peripherals and Mac services and such, but the base laptop itself was free. I remember when I was about 15, I came across a Russian girl, probably a bot, and I ended up mailing her all the time. They never asked for money, but they just talked about their life and stuff. It was like a pen pal that just sent me pictures of themselves undressed every once in a while. Then one day they just stopped responding, and I haven't clicked any of those links since. I was a terrible 18-year-old who had just moved to a new city for college and knew nobody. Through one of those pop-ups, I found a hookup site that was something cheap, like $3 a month. I signed up for the free account and got some messages, but to reply, I needed to be a paying member. I put $10 on a prepaid Visa card so that if I got scammed, it was only for $10. The 1 month I had the account, I got no messages. The day my month expired, I got 7 messages from different girls who'd be way out of my league if they were real. Not stupid enough to fall for it again, I closed my account. $3 spent to learn that those websites are bullcrap is a fairly cheap lesson. Thank you for an actual response. Worth noting, it's not just fake-looking hookup sites that do this. The highly advertised Ashley Madison website does it too. There's basically no real female users on that one. It's all staff trying to bait subscriptions. Literally last night I said F it and clicked on one of the enlargement ads. Literally all it was a 50-minute video of a bunch of women saying that size matters, and if your member is under 7 inches, you're out of luck. Not signed up as such, but a mate of mine met a girl on one of those cam sites you can just flick through, past all of the wangs. Anyway, she was amazing and did everything you want, including getting him to play as well. I added him on Facebook, legit pictures apparently, and she was gorgeous. Next minute, she disappears off camera and instead a video plays of him cranking off. She comes back and says it's going to cost him £500 or she'll send it to his entire Facebook list. He panicked, deleted his entire Facebook account, and to this day is too scared of opening it back up just in case. I didn't commit, but my antivirus program popped up saying that it blocked an attack after clicking one of those ads. In the name of science, I clicked on one of those ads after reading this post, and I'm happy I did, because I just won $1 million and a free gift hamper. See you later, suckers! Hi, I'm a prince of a remote country. If you want to get some more $1 million, send me your bank account information. A lot of people are beginning their stories with, "I was 18 years old." Oh, we know you were younger than 18, mate. Well, back when I was younger, it was all adultfriendfinder.com. Believe it or not, I actually met my wife there. We've been married almost 9 years now. Well, I signed up for Adult Friend Finder because I was sick of the runaround on eHarmony, and I just wanted to do the deed with someone. After sending out about 10 messages, I realized most of them were bots. But then I got one message back from a girl that was 9 years younger than me that didn't follow the same template. I was highly skeptical that it was a scam, but we exchanged a few texts, did a video chat, and we met a week later. 2 years later, we were married and have been for 9 years. At first, we told people that we met through friends, then we started saying we met online and being vague about the site. Now we joke about it with people if they really want to know. I mean, the fact that we're 29 stories in and we only just found our first entirely positive one should tell you everything that you need to know about these ads. My dad. He's old. He still thinks you have to pay for prawns. About every 6 months, he goes through an identity theft situation and also has a computer loaded full of viruses. Back when the shady toolbars were still a thing, he'd have 2 or 3 all the time. The last few times I rebuilt his computer, I just left a shortcut on the desktop to uprawn, and then an ad-blocking host file. 9 out of 10 sites saying, fill out a survey or sign up for a free account, take you to a totally irrelevant site to do so and never redirect you back. One of them, I checked the source code, all the click here button did was summon a GIF of a loading bar. Okay, so this was about a year ago, and mind you, I was low on sleep. I'd just finished an 8-hour shift and it was like 7 AM. So I saw an ad that said something like, enroll now for premium and receive a 14-day free trial, or some bullcrap. Anywho, I typed in my info as fast as possible because at this point I'm very sleepy and very in the mood. I then proceed to crank away all of my fears of any charges because damn, it was good to have high-definition prawns. Upon finishing my duties, panic sets in and I quickly check my bank account and a lot of charges were pending. I spent the rest of the day trying to contact someone about cancelling my subscription. Long story short, I ended up calling my bank and thanked the skies it was a guy because I didn't feel like explaining this to a woman. I caught chlamydia, or what WebMD told me was chlamydia, from an ex. I was too embarrassed to go to my doctor, I was in my early 20s at the time, so I went to a shady pharmaceutical site that I'd seen pop-ups for. I used my trusty NetSpend prepaid Visa and ordered as much penicillin as I could afford. I kept popping pills until my wang stopped leaking a few weeks later. So I guess that was a win? I swiped right on a super hot and busty lass. It's a match. Right. I'm sure the 22-year-old with perfect body and skin is interested in a bold 35-year-old single father. It happens all the time. A guy I worked with in a crappy local bar ran one of those websites on the side, as well as a scummy amateur prawn site trying to imitate another one. He was totally upfront with us about how much of a scam it was, basically asking you to pay for everything. Send a message, pay. Receive a message, pay. Open a message, pay. He made some decent money off it and the prawn site to the point where he moved out west to further his career in the prawn industry. Kinda wonder what happened to him. I've been on Adult Friend Finder for a while. Half a year, I guess. I can't remember. But there are some users that are real and would like to explore more. It's just that there are way too many fake profiles on there when compared to a real person. I'd say 3 to 7. Some guy on the Joe Rogan show experimented with all kinds of gas station eggplant pills. Things that he thought would help his performance, and the stories are fricking hilarious. He would say that his eggplant would get so uncomfortably swole like it got bitten by a snake, but he would keep doing it for the girl's shock value. He eventually stopped because the pills are most likely pure poison. After watching a video on YouTube about fraudulent advertisements, I decided to do an experiment. I clicked on one of those games that are advertised, and they need my credit card details to check that I'm a real person. I put in some fake credit card details and suddenly it says I can't enter the site at this time. You'd have to be really dumb to fall for that. Tinder is full of women within 5 miles from me, none of whom want to do the deed with me. I was bored one night and started chatting with a girl from Collarspace, now called Collar.me. From the very beginning, I knew it was a scam, but I had nothing better to do, so I played along. She kept trying to get me to sign up for her premium site. She would say things like, "It says that they'll charge you, but it won't. It's just so I can send you pics." I played along and said that I'd signed up. She was obviously looking at some part of the system because she started asking me to send her the screenshot of me signing up. The scam was getting so obvious it was cringy by this time. I could tell she was about to give up, so I started saying random tech-sounding stuff like, "Well, maybe it's because the gigabytes don't travel through the Cat5 of my VPN because I'm on a government computer, and the Teradyne sometimes blocks incoming DDoS Wi-Fi requests." She pretends like she understands and tries to help me troubleshoot it. Eventually I get bored and tell her I'm not giving her any money. She told me to F off and stopped talking to me. There was a time in my teens where I discovered that Yoohoo chat rooms had mature chat rooms where you could meet people for voyeurism and such. At first, it was a lot of fun. I was always in the mood and young and fit, and was not picky at all. Early on, I had a lot of success getting mutual cam sessions between myself and women. It didn't take long before it was overrun by bots who would just try and get you to pay sites. One day, I just decided to follow through one of these camgirl sessions. She wasn't even super attractive and had no one else in her room. It cost me probably about $70, but I was more interested in understanding what her experience doing this was like and such. We just chatted for a bit. Basically found out she was Russian and was hired by a company to put on the shows for terrible pay. Basically, long story short, she ended up quitting the whole camgirl thing because she wasn't getting enough viewers to make it worth it after the middlemen took their cut. We actually exchanged personal emails and kept contact for a number of years. Basically, would send random undressed pictures back and forth, and we still cammed back and forth for mutual voyeurism and fun. And I didn't even have to pay for any of this. Definitely not the outcome you'd normally expect from something like this, but it was fun. She never asked me for money or to try and bring her to the US or anything. We'd just sort of chat when we were bored and in the mood. What's the most pathetic way you've seen someone try to look manly? I once worked in an office where they let us pick out our new desks and order them from a catalogue. My boss came in to check mine out and he noticed it was like 6 inches bigger than his new desk. I came in the next morning and he had made the maintenance guys switch them. He claimed it was because his desk was a better height for me. Shockingly, he turned out to be insane in other ways as well. Who'd have thought it? I once saw a P-plater, Australian for new driver, in a hotted-up car waiting at the traffic lights in the rain. He was facing up a hill, and when the lights turned green, he put his foot on the accelerator hard and attempted to speed off and ended up getting absolutely no traction. This resulted in his wheels just spinning and him doing a kind of stationary fishtail while slowly sliding back down the hill. He ended up missing that green light. I couldn't stop laughing. There's a substance called synthol that some bodybuilders and a lot of wannabe tough guys inject themselves with to create fake muscles. Googling for it leads to gems such as guys that look like Popeye and stick figures in water wings. Not so cool. My voice drops lower when I talk to my father-in-law. I rarely catch myself and talk normal. When I do try to talk normal, I think I sound squeaky. I'm nearly 40 with 3 kids, by the way. My boyfriend does this as well. When he's speaking to my dad, his voice will be unnaturally low, but as soon as you get any alcohol in him, he sounds like a frickin' pixie. It's hilarious! When I was but 12, some kid came into middle school with a beard drawn onto his face in Sharpie. He desperately tried to make everyone believe it was his real beard, that he grew it overnight. I must have hit a growth spurt, he said. I wish camera phones were a thing back then. I started shaving every few days when I was 12 and was mocked for it. I had a full beard by 14 and I still got crap for it. You really can't win. Well, I believe the myth that shaving increases beard growth has been thoroughly debunked. The sir, or bearded madam in this last post, was likely always going to be that way. Post-college, my friends started a cigar night as a guys' hangout night. I thought everyone always said don't inhale cigars because they were wimps and couldn't handle the strong buzz. So I intentionally inhaled with every puff throughout the entire cigar. I got so sick I literally turned a pale shade of green like an old cartoon, and puked for an hour until only foam was coming out of me. I went to a party where there was a 4-man hookah set up. My friend had never tried one and was very curious. It turns out, while everyone enjoyed the hookah for a bit, went off to mingle and come back to it later, my friend spent nearly the entire party at the hookah. He spent the latter portion of the party hovering over the toilet. When I was 12 years old, I was walking into a convenience store with a friend. She was a total tomboy. In fact, she looked more like a boy than a girl. As we're walking in, she sees this sweet mid-60s ragtop Corvette, and she's ogling it. I was too, but she makes this big thumbs-up sign to the hot blonde sitting in the passenger seat. This long-haired moron in his late 20s came running out of the convenience store and yelled to my friend Sabrina, "Hey punk, quit making eyes at my girl." He comes over, grabs my friend's arm, pulls back a fist. My friend is just stark white and speechless. I shout, "She's a 12-year-old girl, what are you doing? Stop!" He finally stops, realizes what the heck he's doing, but, always being a moron, says, "Don't let me see you eyeballing her again, or I'll mess you up." I'm not sure what happened after he drove off, but his girlfriend did not look like a happy camper. I'm hoping she dumped his sorry butt. Back in the MySpace days, I knew a kid who took a pic of himself with his shirt off, and then used Photoshop to turn his skin black and give himself a goatee. He also fancied himself a rapper and took on the stage name Diamond, yes, with 2 eyes, because he was so hard. Affluent private school kids, am I right? Oh my god, 2 eyes for a double dose of idiot. I was dating this girl a few years ago, and I was meeting some of her good friends for the first time at Chili's. I'd just turned 21 and they were all younger than me, so I thought, I'll look so cool if I order some alcohol. I'd never ordered drinks before, so I didn't know what to order. I'd only been to parties where there was beer. I thought, nah, beer is no good. I need something with liquor. While I was pondering what to order, the waiter asked me what I wanted to drink. At that moment, only one drink came to mind. Yeah, give me a Cosmopolitan, please. Cue to the waiter bringing me a Chili's branded shaker that I got to take home with a fabulous pink drink in it, and me looking like an offensive caricature of a gay man instead of the Ron Swanson that I thought I'd look like. When the teacher says, if you don't want to learn, then just leave, someone got up and left and swore at the teacher, grinning at his friends. About 30 seconds later, he came back in saying, actually, I kinda need to know this stuff. Honestly, I've got to respect the kid for admitting that and taking the L while looking out for his future. Only barely related, but I had a teacher who would say, oh, go fly a kite if you had a differing idea of what symbolism in a particular book meant. So I packed a folding kite in my backpack, and the next time she requested I go, I did. The detention was worth it. My new dentist is a good-looking 25 or 26-year-old woman. Now I hold off bursting into tears until I get to my car. I had a friend who, when he'd go to the movies with me or one of our other male friends, would always leave an empty seat between himself and us so he didn't look gay. Either that or he got the separate seat because our elbows kept poking him while the rest of us were cranking each other off. I had some friends in high school that would do that when we'd go to the movies. I never knew how to react, so I usually just sat in between them. In high school, I would put Rogaine on my chin and face to try and grow a beard. A bunch of my friends and I were hanging out one time when my best friend's little brother, probably 15 or so at the time, did something very feminine. It was a long time ago, so I don't exactly recall what it was. We all laughed and I yelled at him, "Quick, do something manly!" To which he replied in sheer panic, "I could strip off my clothes and dance for you guys." Needless to say, we never let him live it down. Back in high school, I was friends with a guy on the football team who was pretty much exclusively a bench warmer. Throughout each game, he would discreetly try to rub grass and dirt on his uniform so it looked like he'd seen some action when he ran off the field. My friends and I took up skateboarding one summer and worked at it every day. While we would practice, one of my friends would spend his time rubbing the bottom of his skateboard against concrete corners to make it look like he'd grinded. My freshman year of college in the spring, at the rec pool. The rec pool was the place to be, babes as far as the eye can see. Anywho, my friends and I are out on the pool deck, and I've decided that as we're walking in front of some bikini-clad chicks, that it would be a good time to de-shirt and reveal my awesome torso to them. My shirt got stuck on my neck, and I, blinded by my own shirt, as well as my hubris, fell into the pool with my shirt still around my neck. I was so cool. I took the last place in a hairy chest contest. It's okay, sweetie, I have literally no chest hair or facial hair whatsoever. Of course, I'm a girl, so... Rest assured that if the narrator had competed in that particular tournament, he would have either lost or tied with you. But then again, I know not to enter one. A co-worker of mine was a one-upping, bull-crapping, blatant liar. We'd troll him every day to see how far his lies would go. The one that popped into my head when I saw this group of stories was that he drank a quart of 10W30 motor oil to impress a girl. I have a buddy who was hanging out with us and he starts with, "Oh, I'm friends with the local college cheerleaders. I'll see if they want to come and party with us." He texts them and they say that they're still on their way back from a game. Another buddy comes to join us and we explain who we're going to be hanging out with tonight. He informs us that the game was a home game at 1 in the afternoon, 9 hours before this happened. All the first guy could say was, well, I don't know where they are then." "We know you don't, buddy. I've got a friend just like that. It gets to the point where whenever he says something outrageous, my friends and I just say, cool, and change the subject. Handstand push-ups at a party. Well, I saw a guy doing dips at the library. I knew this guy that would intentionally leave his fly open on his jeans so that people would mention it and he could reply, I guess my huge wang is that noticeable. One time I went for sushi on a first date and I wanted to impress the girl with how much wasabi I could handle with my sushi. I ended up leaving snot all over the place while tears ran down my face. I learned that a friend of mine gets dressed in this order. Cologne, white shirt, more cologne, another white shirt, more cologne, another white shirt, cologne again, his normal shirt, and then more cologne. I always just thought he was a pretty swole guy, but I've learned that he's actually pretty scrawny under there. There are 4 shirts? In 5th grade, I had a classmate who always tried to show off. One day, he claimed that he could make his face red in less than 10 seconds. Spectators gathered. He holds his breath in and pushes to build up pressure in his head. Not sure how else to explain it. His face does get ridiculously red, and then all of a sudden we heard a slight pop noise, and his right eye had moved forward literally half an inch out of his head like it was about to pop out entirely. Shrill screams ensued. The teacher was cursing, and then ambulance sirens sounded in the distance. What a man he was. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I guess this counts as attempted manliness? Back when I was 9 or 10, I was at camp. There was this girl that I liked, so in order to try and look cool, I'd take my glasses off and close my eyes real tight. Eventually, she asked why I was doing that, and I replied that if I couldn't see, I gained super hearing and could hear nature all around me. Needless to say, I was, and am, SAP's mammalian brother. Oh look, I dropped my magnum rubber that I use on my monster dong. One time, I was with a lady friend and my mattress was kind of not aligned properly with the bed spring, and it bothered her. She said, let's fix it, and I said, no, I got it, don't worry. As I bent down to push it forward, it was heavier than I expected. I grunted and pushed forward, and as I did this, I tooted really loudly. I once saw a guy with Thug Life tattooed on his bicep in Comic Sans. Which, do I look like I care about your text preferences? I got this for me, and I got a font that represents me and my life. We from the street, man. We don't have time for all this serif crap. Busy hustling. God damn. I wear the smallest lab coat I can find, with my regular clothes on underneath it. It looks like I have massive guns. I'd like to tell you that everyone else thinks you look like the Michelin Man, but I don't have the heart to tell you. I once saw a group of high school-age kids in a local park accompanied by a young woman. They're all hanging out, and the alpha kid, in an attempt to impress said girl, gets up and takes his shirt off, and then walks around to all of the picnic tables and starts lifting one side of them up as high as he can over and over again. It was quite clear that he had the strongest pubescent muscles. I peacock by going to karaoke bars and singing Regina Spektor songs in the manliest falsetto possible. At a party in my university, a reasonably tubby guy was trying to chat up a girl. She didn't seem particularly interested but was being polite. The guy gets a text, flips open his phone and starts to read it. Suddenly realizing the faux pas he's unwittingly committed, he proceeds to snap his phone in half as if to say, I care far more about this conversation than some meaningless phone. The girl realizes that was dumb and immediately leaves, so the boy has no phone and no chance of getting any. Also, I know a couple of 30-plus males that went down and egged the local Occupy protesters. So tough. God damn, that's pathetic. I grew up in a small town and there used to be this idiot that would drive around in a crappy convertible by himself. He had his parents' hi-fi speakers in the back and would drive around talking on his cell phone. The town didn't have any cell phone towers or reception back then. Pickup artists are as hilarious as they are stupid and annoying. I don't know if either of these guys technically count as pickup artists, or if they regularly attempted their stunts to pick up girls, but I wouldn't be surprised. I heard on the radio once that the guys who hung out with Frank Sinatra had a difficult time keeping up with him while partying, so they would get a watered-down Coke so that it appeared to be whiskey, while Frank hit the hard stuff. Big old trucks with a pair of truck nuts hanging on the back of them. I was bringing my wife, who makes fun of how unmanly I am, a bowl of soup, and I filled it pretty high. The tops of my fingers ended up in the soup. To show manliness, I didn't flinch and ended up with blisters on several of my fingers. When I was younger, around 6 or 7, I had to stay at my grand's during the day while school was out. She had this little tricycle that was way too small for me to sit on, so I used to stand on the back axle and drive it around like I was a rally driver. Don't ask. One day she had to walk around the shops, so like any good rally driver secret agent superhero, I gave her support via the Subaru. Again, don't ask. On the way back, we went another route and had to walk past 2 or 3 girls around my age. Wanting to man up, I wanted to act big and hard, so I jumped off the Subaru, lifted the tiny tricycle up and held it vertically above my head like a champion weightlifter. At the time, I was a huge wrestling fan, particularly of The Rock. My favorite part of The Rock was the people's eyebrow. Google if you don't know. I strutted up to these little girls, tricycle above my head, turned to them and gave them the baddest people's eyebrow to ever grace this earth, along with the line, "Ladies?" The only thing that could possibly happen, happened. I fell. The tricycle came crashing onto the floor, elbows and knees were grazed, and there were tears in my eyes. My gran had to carry me home. I was only 6 or 7 at the time, but frick. That still hurts, man. I started dressing nicely and began to improve my vocabulary. Oh well. My mom grew a mustache. Oh wait, I might have misunderstood the topic question. I was working out at the gym, and it just so happened that a recent ex of mine was there at the same time. We met at the gym, so this wasn't really a shock. I was at the pull-up bar and she was pretty close by, so I got it in my head that I should try and show off or something. So I started doing lots of pull-ups really fast and intensely, when my hand slipped and I fell off the bar and right onto my butt. I kept my head down and just walked straight into the changing room. It felt bad, man. I got on a plane a few months ago. For my background, I'm male. I put my bag in the overhead compartment and sat down. I looked over and saw a girl. If you must know, she wasn't unattractive. Read, she was really hot. She was having trouble fitting her bag in the overhead compartment. I, being the gentleman that I am, saw the opportunity to assist, thinking that at some point down the road it might lead to something. So I tried for about 30 seconds and then said, "It doesn't fit." I sat down and abort mating rituals. About 30 seconds later, I looked up and another girl had gotten up and helped the first girl put her bag in the compartment, and it fit in like 2 seconds. I don't know what they did, I don't know how they got it, all I know is that I didn't make eye contact with either of them for the rest of the flight. My favorites are the guys who refuse to drink, quote, girly drinks. They don't want to be thought of as gay or a Nancy. It's a drink, yo. The people who try to fight the bouncers or the bar staff in general. There are more of us and the bouncers are sober. Good Lord help you if you touch one of our waitresses inappropriately. We like our hot waitresses and most of them are dating staff members. My cousin has "Sure Thing" tattooed on his forearm in the most gangster-looking letters he could find. He's pretty nerdy but adopted a gangster persona after leaving home and joining the armed forces. I laughed out loud when I saw his Facebook picture showing it off. Flashing the sideways peace sign and trying to look fly with his new tattoo very visible. Cap sideways, of course. I used to skateboard a lot. I also had a slightly overprotective mother, so anytime I went to a skate park, I was that scrawny kid in full pads. I didn't give an F, it meant that I got to skateboard. Anyway, I think I was 13 or 14 at the time. I was minding my own business, probably trying to do a super stylish boneless in a quarter pipe. Don't hate, the old school tricks are rad. And I see this guy bail and just lie in the bottom of the bowl area while his board flew out onto the deck. He was a few years older than me and was obviously not hurt seriously, and there with several of his buddies. Being a nice guy, I grabbed his board, which had rolled close to where I was, and rolled it back down to him. I skated away, not paying attention, and then I hear him yell out, "Who did that?" Apparently, the board had rolled into his side while he was facing the other way. There was no way it had hurt in the least. I'd made sure that it would roll at a safe speed to him. As I turned around to see what the shouting was, I see his buddies pointing at me. "Hey, you want to fight?" he shouts at me. Now, You don't know me all that well, but you can imagine I should be feeling slightly intimidated. And to be honest, prior to this situation, I always thought I would have been intimidated by a bully. Thankfully, the situation gave me some much-needed perspective. I'd just done this guy a favor and he wants to fight me. What the frick, right? Is he serious? If you want to fight me, I'm right here, I reply with no hesitation. He just kind of stares at me for a second and then turned away. I heard his buddies giving him a hard time and it was like a joyous chorus of angels. I felt like I owned that frickin' skate park for the rest of the day. Getting a motorcycle license to try and be cool and manly. I actually realize it's fricking amazing and that the aforementioned status didn't matter to me once I achieved it. I used to waitress at a bar on the main street of a small town, which was also home to several restaurants nearby. Drunk guys trying bullcrap manliness to hit on me became normal after a while. One night I was walking past two guys sitting at the main bar and one of them flagged me down on the pretense of some bullcrap question about the menu. Then, like a good friend, he started trying to wingman his buddy, telling me how he was such a great guy and thought I was cute, and oh by the way, was on the big NFL team of our state, and that I should be totally flattered that he was interested in me and maybe try to give him my number or go home with him. Meanwhile, said guy is sitting next to us trying his best to look humble. After trying not to laugh at him outright, I extricated myself and for some reason didn't try to explain to him the two main reasons why this tactic was clearly not going to work for them. The first, unlike most people in that town, I do not give a crap about football. The second, his friend was still in his work uniform from the restaurant next door. When did book smarts not necessarily equal real smarts? My boss and I were chatting on the phone about some random work issue. He told me to call so-and-so for some reason. I told him that I needed the number. He said, "Hold on, gotta look up the number on my phone." Shuffling sounds. Oh crap, where's my phone? Damn, Jane, my phone must have fallen out of my pocket. Son of a Mitch. Well, I'm gonna have to call you back once I find it. I cracked up until he jokingly yelled, "Don't you tell anyone about this." Once I got a call from one of my college professors, one of the smartest and friendliest people that I know. Can you pick me up at this address? 30 miles from his place without public transport? Sure. How did you end up there? I went to go and sell my car to this one guy. I joined Mensa for the card. When I went to Kinko's to laminate it, I didn't read the instructions on the wall, and the laminate melted to the machine. I had to get the Kinko's guy to open the machine for me, but by then, the card was bubbling. When he scraped it out and saw what it was, he laughed. He laughed so hard. He thought there was 60 cents and $1. Took him a solid couple of minutes to figure out that there wasn't, after we just sat there laughing at him. My wife, the smartest person I know by the way, looked at the sky at about 3 p.m. and asked why the sun was so dim. She was looking at the moon. I mean, I would look up at the moon during the day as a 5-year-old and wonder why it was in the sky. Surely this presumably adult woman could also see it and realize that it was a distinct entity from the blazing ball of light that we can't look directly at during any given time. Brain fart moment, I suppose? I was at law school with a smart guy. We shared a house. He wouldn't heat up anything in the microwave if it hadn't been brought as a microwavable product. He was convinced it would get pumped with radiation and he'd be eating radioactive food. My grandfather is a chemical engineer that used to work for Dow handling startup of some of their biggest plants. He went on to be an expert in industrial cleanup operations. He's a practical genius. He also decided it was perfectly acceptable to put stuffing into a plastic bowl and slide it into a 400-degree oven. I mean, I once put pizza in the oven on a wooden plate I was going to serve it on after, so I'm not going to judge him. We still ate the pizza, but it definitely had a strange taste. I once tried opening a thing of Pillsbury biscuits with a can opener a few years ago. My mother took my picture with it to use it against me in the future. I had a college professor insist that afternoons started at 11 a.m. because that's when we had lunch. I have no idea how you could get that wrong. Afternoon starts afternoon. It's in the damn word. Fun thing about college faculty, they're generally very, very knowledgeable about one thing only, and actually pretty stupid about a lot of other things. That's what you get for spending 10 years devoted to the study of one thing, usually somewhat obscure, to the point where you're probably the world authority on it. Can confirm, my stepfather is a geology professor at a university. The guy can tell you anything about any rock. He can do complex math equations in his head. The guy literally forgets to eat sometimes. He can be completely stumped by a basic math equation if it's written differently than he would expect. It's a good thing he doesn't have a garage, or he would probably have accidentally poisoned himself by now. One time, my friends and I were walking downtown and we were passing through a parking lot. One of my friends noticed this and asked, "Is this a car dealership?" "No, this is a parking lot." So naturally he responded with, "But why are there cars here?" It took a few minutes of explaining for him to remember that cars do tend to park in parking lots. This one is so bad that reading it got me stupid. My boyfriend. We did those 90-second microwavable rice packets and I smelled something burning. I asked, "How long did you put the rice in for?" And he said, 3 minutes. I told him, "It was only supposed to be 90 seconds. And he looked at me like I was stupid and told me, yeah, that's 90 seconds. Then a few seconds later, he turned bright red. I still make fun of him for it. One of my mum's best friends growing up has a brother who is absolutely brilliant. This is a guy who graduated top of his class, got a perfect score on the SAT, and went to and graduated from Harvard. Sometime into his adult life, he decided to go to the grocery store a few blocks away. Ordinarily, he walks, but he decided to drive this one particular time. He went to the store, got his stuff, and proceeded to walk home. The next morning, he went to get into his car, only to discover that it was missing from his driveway. So he filed a police report. A few days went by, and he had to go to the grocery store again. He walked like he normally does, and found his car exactly where he left it a few days before. This is a Harvard graduate. A girl I knew in high school needed a piece of paper, so she turned on the computer and printed one out. I did this, and I still feel smart about it. I needed some special thesis, archival, acid-free, whatever paper to print my thesis that goes into the library. There was one printer on campus with the special paper, but when I printed there, one page with a complex graph would crash the printer out of memory. I asked the printing desk there if I could just have some paper from the tray to print it in my office printer. It worked there with the plain paper, and they said no, I couldn't do that. I proceeded to print a single-page, empty document with as many copies as the number of pages my thesis had. They then gave me the stack of printed paper that I needed. Probably the ink in my printer wasn't compatible for long-term storage, but I doubt anyone is ever going to read it anyway. Working at IT support, a woman with a PhD in virology calls up. Her keys on her keyboard keep sticking. We do the standard troubleshooting but couldn't fix it, so I went to her desk. What was the cause of the keys sticking? Well, Miss PhD was eating a whole gosh darn pineapple over her keyboard. My doctor wife, resident at the top university hospital, constantly misuses the words door and window interchangeably. It's a riot. "Sweetie, please close the door." "Where are you going?" "The door." "Oh crap, I meant the window." This is practically daily. That's fine, the narrator constantly mixes up left and right as well as east and west when he's giving directions, even though he knows full well what each of those directions means if they're given to him. Some of our brains have weird mental blocks on them. About 5 years ago, I got one of those motion-activated air fresheners and put it on my dresser. It wasn't until I got up the next morning that I discovered it was lined up directly at eye level where I got out of bed. I effectively booby-trapped my room against myself. My sister-in-law is a molecular biologist. Her level of genius is astounding. She put herself through school via scholarships, but made pocket money working at Ponderosa. One day she was changing the oil in the fryer and set the old hot grease tub on the floor and proceeded to step in it. She literally cooked her own foot. It took several skin grafts, but mostly looks normal now. So whenever someone does something stupid in our family, we say they cooked their foot. Professors with all kinds of degrees who've written renowned books or papers, but can't figure out how to make a video play on the projector instead of on the monitor. My father told me a story about his father. My grandfather was a brilliant chemical engineer working for Procter & Gamble. He actually led the team that figured out how to make liquid Tide. One day he came home, scooped himself some ice cream, put chocolate chips on top, and put it in the microwave. He was surprised that the ice cream melted rather than the chocolate. I stuck my hand in a pot of boiling water. My brain just stopped working for that second, apparently. I took a sauté pan out of the oven without a mitt. We should start our own cooking show. 10 out of 10 would watch. Tonight on Scald and Burn, we need someone to play the long-suffering, ridiculously hot standby medic. You in? My friend is standing in line at Target and has a 9-volt battery and a penny in his pocket. The two make contact and naturally the penny gets hot. He pulls the 9-volt out of his pocket and looks at it as if he's never seen this object before. He sticks his tongue on it, shocks himself, pulls it away and looks at it, and then does it again. Pulls it away, looks at it, and does it a third time. The cashier just stared at him like someone let a monkey out of a zoo. A lot of smart people I know are just terrible with money. I know people with 4.0 GPAs and high-paying jobs that are borderline bankrupt because they spend every dollar they have trying to keep up with the high rollers who run their company. Like, these are smart people, but incredibly insecure as well, and that's just a terrible combination. I made peanut butter cookies last night and I forgot to put in all of the dry ingredients. So you made peanut butter soup. My best friend has a genius-level IQ. He was in the top 10 of my graduating class and has nearly a 4.0 GPA studying chemical engineering. I once saw him look right down the barrel of a loaded shotgun. I did this with a champagne bottle I was trying to open. The cork popped, bounced off my forehead, and then ricocheted off the ceiling. I had a round welt on my forehead for a day or two. I'm not a genius. I did that as a best man at my buddy's wedding. Made the toast, got the bottle. Wait, how's this thing work? Never opened champagne before. Maybe I'll put it on the table and look down to see what the problem is. Bang! Mother fricker, right above my eye. Play it cool, play it cool. Maybe no one saw. No, they all did. Well, I said no wedding is complete unless blood is spilled. Just didn't think it would be mine. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, my really smart wife married me, but I'll forgive her for that one. A friend of mine used a variant of this on his wife. While shopping for curtains, he said, "Well, since I clearly have better taste than you," and she interrupted, "You do not?" "Sure I do. I married you, and you married me." According to him, she just sort of flopped her jaw like a fish for a bit. He said it's the only time he's ever won an argument with her. Guys, he's been married for 15 plus years at this point. You do not pull this card after a month or even 10. My old lady of 7 years just finished up her master's in accounting. She roasted a chicken yesterday, and as the timer rang, I yelled to her to remember to use a hot pad to take the lid off the roaster pan, because like the pan, the lid handle is hot. I get a sarcastic, "No duh," back from her. I watch from a mirror with a good angle of her, as she takes the pan out with 2 hot pads on the side handles of the pan. She then sets the pan on top of the stove, puts the hot pads back in the drawer, then grabs the handle on the lid of the pan. She burned her hand again, dropped the pot lid to the floor loudly, and then ran to the living room to see if I was laughing. I was. Dumbest smart person I know. I love her. I feel like I could have renamed this video "Stupid Things That People with High Academic Degrees Do," and it would have been nearly just as applicable, to be honest. I was going to bake cookies for my 20th year high school reunion, but I encountered a problem. I explained this problem to my fiancé, like so. I was going to make cookies for my reunion, but it ended up that I couldn't. Why? Well, your mum gave me that box of cookie cutters that has over 100 cookie cutters, and I was going to make cookies in the 9 and 5 shape for the class of 1995. It has 1 through 8, but no 9. At this point, he just stared at me because he thought I'd come to a realization on my own, which I hadn't, by the way. I said, "What? You just have to turn the number 6 upside down and it's a 9. A long, blank stare from me. The number 6 upside down is the number 9. You did realize that, didn't you? He cracked up when he figured out that I never realized this. I have a PhD. That's okay, my mom is a programmer for Boeing and she complained that her heated blanket was still too hot. Turns out the number 7 looks like an L upside down and she thought it was on the low setting. I have a relative, cousin of my aunt, who has a doctorate in engineering and made a ton of money in petroleum engineering. Yet, over the years, she sent a large fraction of it to Nigerian scammers. Even more interestingly, he started doing this before the internet, when they just sent snail mail letters to people, and has sent it to the same Nigerian family over the decades. His way of supporting Africa, I guess? But then this person also didn't believe we landed on the moon or that the Holocaust happened, so there's that. A girl I went to high school with went to the same university as me. She was top 5 in our graduating class and hasn't gotten lower than a 3.8 in 2 years of college, including biochemistry and organic chemistry. One summer day we were out at a bonfire and she had a hood on because, and I quote, "Don't moon rays make you paler?" My grandfather has a PhD in computer science, one of the early ones. He was on the team that developed the fingerprint computer that ended the days of using a magnifying glass to match prints. The original computer now lives at the Smithsonian. It was snowing out and he said he was grilling steaks. I thought he was on the outside porch. I looked outside and he was not there. I found him in the basement using a huge gas grill. It took several minutes to explain to him why this was not a good idea. Mine was the stupidest thing I've ever done. It was pretty embarrassing. I was leaving my flat and I was talking to a girl on my uni course. As I got to the door to exit the building, I noticed someone outside and was going to let them come inside before I left. After about 6 or 7 seconds of me just standing there, the girl asked me what was up, and I told her that the person outside must have been having trouble getting inside. She then pointed out that it was my reflection. In conclusion, I'm as stupid as a dog. I also just blasted myself full in the face with some air freshener because I thought the nozzle was pointed the other way. I am now blind. My friend turned 20 one day, and we were talking about his birthday. I proceeded to comment, "Wow, you've been a teenager for 20 years. Yeah, my friends don't let me live that one down. I told my sister, who was turning 25, that she was halfway to 30. Spent an incredible amount of time and effort nervously trying to figure out why an almost new and very expensive oscilloscope won't turn on. The reason was that someone had toggled the switch on one of the built-in power strips on the lab bench to off. We were getting ready for dinner one night and we were kind of in a rush to get it done. Whatever we were making, it required bread. Well, the only bread we had was frozen at the time, so we had to quickly defrost it. So my mother randomly yelled for my oldest brother, who happens to be the smartest out of all of us, to go get it from the freezer and bring it to the kitchen. He delivered the frozen bread to the kitchen and our mum had our hands full. So she told him, "Take the bread tie off and put it in the microwave." So he takes the tie off and puts the tie in the microwave and sets it to defrost. Not even 30 seconds later, he starts saying, Mum, the bread tie's on fire." Turns out my brother thought "it" meant the bread tie and not the frozen loaf of bread. In conclusion, smart brother put bread tie in the microwave to defrost and it caught on fire. That man did exactly what his mother told him to do and is beyond reproach. In a military court of tribunal, he would be 100% exonerated, and I won't hear a bad word against him. My friend Kevin went to Caltech and works for JPL. He's an actual rocket scientist, literally one of the smartest people I can think of. When we were in our early 20s, he had to take his brand new Honda Civic back to the dealership after 2 weeks of ownership because he filled it with diesel. Afterwards, I asked him, "Isn't the diesel nozzle incompatible with the standard gas tanks?" His response was, "It's not. It wasn't easy, but I made it work." My friend is a geneticist, smart guy all around. A few months ago, he spent 10 minutes trying to push open the door in his kitchen, and eventually his hand just went through it, and he gashed his arm and ended up getting a bunch of stitches. If he had pulled the door instead, it would have opened. I travel a lot for work, and I'm going to London later this month. One of my girlfriend's best friends is an NICU nurse, saving the lives of premature babies every day, and has forgotten more about biology and anatomy than I've ever known. She asked what language they speak in London and if I was going to visit the Eiffel Tower if I got some free time. This one is about me. I'm a senior in engineering, being paid to do some fancy research that we hope will easily eradicate third world diseases. My dad has always managed my finances and never really taught me much. I just got a credit card and had a $500 limit, spent $492 in a month, and got confused when during the next calendar month, after the statement, my credit card was still being declined. I thought the limit reset every month regardless of if you paid your balance. It just made sense to me. When I called my dad asking why my credit card hadn't reset yet, he laughed at me for a solid hour and told all his business partners. I laughed it off as being an engineer and not a finance person like him, but my lack of real-world experience with economics or money is also sad. I'm a living case of why we should have useful life skills classes in high school. This girl I was kind of seeing at the time asked me if I wanted to watch a movie, so we go up to her room and she popped in Elf. She turned to me and asked, "Wait, can you watch this movie since you're Jewish?" She has a 4.0 GPA and is going to law school next year. Also, when I eventually told her I was a virgin, she asked me if I had ever had a stiffy. I was 19. Not seen directly, but I heard the professor tell these two stories. This man is an expert with nanomaterials and just an all-round physics rock star, and yet I have not one, but two stories about him. The first, the professor began watching karate movies and became a fan. Soon, he begins to wonder if he can reproduce some of the feats he's seen various martial artists perform on film. "I'm a physicist," he says. "I can do this." So he gets a stack of a few cinder blocks and tries to break them with his fist. He shattered almost every bone in his hand. The second story, once his home's water heater stopped heating water. "I'm a physicist," he says again. "I can do this." After all, he reasons, the water heater is just a really big resistor submerged in a tank of water with some plumbing attached to it all. Why not repair it himself? The basement cleanup cost him a few $1,000s plus the cost of a new water heater and professional installation. I work in a hospital with some of the most talented neurosurgeons on the West Coast. These are the folks that are flown out to Johns Hopkins, Columbia University, or India and China to give presentations to the world's best in the medical field. Many of them still type with just their index fingers. They can't spell for crap, and this is just a regular thing with doctors. One of them couldn't figure out how to open his coffee. You just pull out the stirrer that doubles as the plug to keep your coffee warm and prevent spills. He eventually just gave up and took the lid off. Weekly scheduling issues when they want to get a friend's family in next week when they're booked for 6 months out. "Sorry, doctor, you're booked out. If you wanted to have complete control over your schedule, you should have gone for more money in at a for-profit hospital. That's why your friends can do it at their hospital. This is a public hospital. No one jumps the line because they're richer or have the hookup." Almost half of them don't even know how to really use a computer for anything more than Facebook. Their assistants handle everything. These are usually the over 50 crowd, and most of the younger surgeons don't have this issue. I'm always impressed at how many doctors are incredibly unhealthy in their habits. Most of them smoke, do substances, wolf down double bacon cheeseburgers twice a day, rarely exercise, and hardly even go to their own doctor. We had one orthopedist, highly respected and very talented, park in a handicap spot because he thought that symbol applied to him because he treats all the people in the wheelchairs. I'd much prefer to think he was being a selfish prick, he's actually a nice guy, and was feigning being dumb to get a nice parking spot. We didn't push the issue. The thing is, he has his own reserved parking spot. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.